Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, or at least we're almost back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Kind of a major update happening here, so we can see that they're doing 2 gigabytes of download. These cards that they're highlighting seem to be slightly newer cards, because I don't recognize them, but it is worth pointing out that you really only see this loading scene when you first play the game or when you get a major update. So since the launch of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, this is like the second time I've really had to sit in front of this screen for any significant amount of time. There have been these little updates for just a few megabytes. Particularly, I know that one of the major things about the update here is it's getting rid of this update for Steam, at least. Because they're just using the internal Steam auto update service, which, yeah, that should have been the default option anyways. From the new update onward, the game will now automatically update upon launch for Steam users. Room matches between accounts of different versions are not possible, so there probably was some cheated see, team battles as a duel mode, card activation animations during duels, choosing the order of effects in standby and in phases. Some of these updates might have been like not already here. These may have been previous updates, although the way this all reads is that all of this is new. Although, honestly, this is a large wall of text and some patches. Let's just skip all that. Large wall of text with a large wall of other comments and text. All of which I would rather just learn while playing the game than actually read. This still is very... Not only is this very mobile-centric to have a pop-up every time you launch the app with updates, it's kind of old-fashioned too, to slam the player with notices and updates that most players don't care about and won't even notice the difference. People just want to jump into the game. Even Marvel Snap, which I'm still wasting a lot of time on, it really gets in the way of just jumping into a game. And by that I mean there's literally one screen and one button you have to click before you get into a game. I wouldn't be upset if every time I launched Marvel Snap, it started a countdown of 3 seconds in which it was like trying to make a match immediately as I launched it and just throwing me into a game. A new selection pack is here, so we've got some new cards to open. Maintenance notice is pointless information. Issues notices are pointless information. So yeah, I'm still playing Marvel Snap. I am not playing Project Nike, Goddess of Victory. I played it a little bit more. Really didn't like it. Decided to go on to the Destiny Child Reddit and point out some observations I had about why I think Nike has really screwed themselves over compared to Destiny Child and made a much worse game. And a lot of people agreed, some people disagreed. It was probably the most successful interaction I've had on Reddit so far, which I've only tried a couple of interactions. Like, compared to some of the other more tech focused communities where it's dead and there really isn't any responses at all. At least I got responses, even if none of them actually agreed with me. Not all of them agreed with me, which is fine. It really was an opinion piece, but I do think Nike is just really short-sighted because of the way it has designed itself. Alright. So, yeah, this new selection pack is going to be released in a day, I guess. Because this is the old one. All cards you own. So this is changed. Interesting. So this gives you it. Also, I think they've zoomed in the card pictures a little bit. Made them a little less small. Because this is scrolling down further. And this is 85 cards. Newly added cards. Also, that as a concept changes things quite a bit to say, yes, this pack actually does have newly added cards. 7,072 newly added cards. Apparently, maybe newly added means newly added to your collection. Or maybe what it means is newly added cards would be glowing in color. Yeah. Well, it does seem like it's a nicer system. It'll take me maybe a little while to figure that out. Yeah. Inherently, Project Nikke creates robot anime waifu characters that are in a military unit, that are going to only be military themed, and it has a fighting animation where it's heavily focused on either showing off the butt jiggle or the boob jiggle when they're shooting and reloading, which breaks half of your characters into be, alright, these are butt characters, so they have butt revealing costumes, which aren't even that lewd compared to Destiny Child, which is really what people were expecting and what was in, from what I hear, the beta. So you have some boob ones and you have some butt ones, and the boob ones only focus on boobs, the butt ones only focus on butts, but it's all wrapped in military equipment, so they're all very covered up with just like armor and bullet belts and things like that, and there's just no room for any real variety compared to Destiny Child, where the child's the anime waifus in Destiny Child are magical creatures that can look like anything they want. So there's just a huge limitation there. Now, I know not that many people are interested in male characters in Nikke in the first place, but the way it seems set up, it seems like you're probably never going to even see a male character, where Destiny Child would throw in a male character every 10th or 12th female character they throw in there. Which that helps with interaction, certainly, and storyline reasons. You can write better interactions when you have males interacting with females as friends or potential rival interests, or males interacting with males. At least when you look at the world from that gender-specific eye, which most people do kind of have been raised to think gender-specific interactions. Even the most the most non-binary people really wouldn't say that society has become uninterested in the gender of people who they're interacting with. And there's some like real differences too that have to be admitted, that the chemicals and the experiences that the chemicals in the brains of women are different than the chemicals in the brains of men. The experiences women have in life are different from the experiences men have in life. Unfortunately, there's just no real reality in which everybody is treated equally and fairly. And that's a long speech to say, yep, Nikke just doesn't have any men characters. And that's a problem. It does have men characters, but they're not going to be husbandos to the waifus, and they're not going to show up. The Nikkes don't fight each other. Instead, you're shooting boring looking robots that don't look like humans called raptors, which means you never get to face head on the Nikkes that are potentially things you want to collect. So that's just a kind of nightmare problem also, in that you never get to see the face of anybody, so you never really get to connect with any of the Nikkes. And they exacerbate the fact that they don't care about showing the face of the Nikkes by then creating a lot of Nikkes that have just headgear on, so you can't see their face anyways. It's just like VR headset armor type things. So of the 30 anime waifus in the game already, it seems like at least 15 of the lower tier characters are not interesting to look at all. And they're kind of hard to distinguish from each other. Again, just because you're getting into that narrow limitation of everybody kind of has to be militaristic. Also, because they're kind of in the Nikkes are military robots, they really can't have different goals or different personalities. They're going to have to follow orders. They're going to have to stay within the military structure to some extent. And so, as far as I got, which was probably about chapter 3, the story was just really uninteresting. The characters that would have been the draw would have been are not there. At least as far as chapter 3, the character that gets killed in the first chapter and just gets fridged, which is the phrase I should have used, isn't back. Instead, a different character is introduced. So yeah, I had some other criticisms that I put on the post, and yeah, it's getting some people pushing back. A lot of people really hate the monetization in Nikke and hate that Tencent is involved in general. I definitely saw that mentioned at least once, if not a couple times. But yeah, I didn't really look deep into Nikke's monetization, but I definitely could see that there was not really a great onboarding system with a lot of like pools or anything that would make me want to feel like I would want to do the gacha element in the game. And there wasn't seemingly much of a daily quest system that they were emphasizing, because nothing there jumped out to make me want to come back the next day. So yeah, I think I'm mostly done with Nikke, which, yeah, I hoped that would have been more of a success, and that does put some possible concern around it puts some concern around the other shift up game that is supposed to be the AAA game. I forget the name of it. But yeah, I am concerned that that may also turn out to be lackluster. Nikke technically was, I think, made by a new third team from Shift Up, which arguably means that the Shift Up that I like is still mostly focused on Destiny Child, and then there are just 2 other teams that were hired under that company's name to make the AAA game that's coming out, or the or Nikke. Shift Up might just be the beginning of a Tencent equivalent for Korea, as there really isn't a Korea video game company that I can think of off the top of my head. There probably is something there, and at any point you could assume that like Samsung could put a ton of funding into a video game company in Korea, since Samsung almost owns the country of South Korea. But yeah, it would be surprising. The other thing I guess to mention about Destiny Child is their second soundtrack has been teased. And of course their events are still going on. One of the most fair criticisms against my post certainly was that I was comparing a brand new game to Destiny Child Global, which came out years after Destiny Child in Korea came out and had a lot of time to add a lot of content and build itself up, which is a mostly fair argument, although it also doesn't feel like they really learned a lot of lessons from their experience with Destiny Child, and it's been out in Korea I think at least 8 years. I would even venture to say the spin-off tower defense game in which Destiny Child Shift Up just licensed the images of the Destiny Child characters and had really no other involvement with it had a better launch. I've been playing Darkest Dungeon, to mention that, and I'm fairly close, I think, to giving up on Darkest Dungeon. I looked up some tips and tricks type strategy guides, but there is actually not a lot of hope that I can make it any much more progress, really. The thing is, the core gameplay mechanic of Darkest Dungeon is just not something that I ever was that into, and I think the people who are that into it really held Darkest Dungeon up on their shoulders, and then I think a lot of people probably never even engaged with the game or bought it or played it. Shockingly, Darkest Dungeon 2 is either in early access right now or about to be released in early access. It says on Steam it's coming out in February of 2023. I have not really seen anybody talk about it. I am super surprised that there wouldn't have been more hype and more announcements around it, but whatever. But yeah, I'm just not really satisfied with the experiences I'm having. One of the tricks that I think really just highlights kind of the lack of explanation and onboarding that the game has, because it just doesn't explain anything to you ever. But apparently, if you are at exactly 0 light level and you open up curios, treasure chests, things like that, you'll get like a ton more loot. So you're supposed to be running around the dungeons emptying them out of fights and using scouting way more often than you would think you would use it, to avoid ambushes and fights in hallways. Like, but yeah, you're supposed to clear out a dungeon and then go back and open all the treasure chests after the fact. Which that is something that I would have never thought of. Not for a second. Keep on playing here. I'm going quiet. Sorry about that. Yeah. So you just never really never really feels like you make enough progress. Things in the tips and tricks that I thought I was gonna hear were totally not there. Like getting rid of negative quirks, getting positive quirks. Basically, the tips and tricks I heard said they don't really matter at all, which is crazy. The one character, the Vestal, has really low healing at level 0 and its lower levels, so I've never really had that many Vestals or tried to level up the Vestal, and they say, the tips and tricks says, no, you've got to use the Bestial to heal because it is super overpowered at higher levels. You would never know that. And I'm playing like on the easiest of difficulty. There are super hard difficulties in Darkest Dungeon where 16 deaths you lose completely. It really just comes off as a game that is not meant for your average gamer. It comes off as a game that is meant for I have 3 here. If I summon 3, I'll get another 3. I'm gonna activate this. So yeah, I think I probably am gonna try and give it a couple more days, and then I am just going to try to run the Darkest Dungeon runs, regardless of how much progress I've made. Like, I've kind of gotten everything upgraded, so if I got a second wind and really wanted to play, I'd be in a kind of decent position to start over from scratch and play a second time. But it would also mean I would have to enjoy things, which I'm just not enjoying playing the game. Unlike Binding of Isaac, I guess the equivalent here is if I had played Binding of Isaac for over 30 hours and I had never decided I actually wanted to go into like She-Hole or the Angel Realms, and I was just always ending it because it was so difficult just to beat Mom's Heart. That's kind of where I am at. Of course, for that comparison to be fairly accurate, you would also have to say no new items really ever would have unlocked in the first 30 hours, and no new characters or abilities would have unlocked, and there would have been no improvements. Like, there isn't really a lot of improvements happening. Stress, which is super bad when you're at a mid-tier level character, is just not that big of a deal at level 6. So you can put on these very rare items that will increase stress, and it doesn't matter because they give you so many other bonuses on top of increasing stress. But the game doesn't explain that, so why would you ever believe that that was the case? And very rare items are not even that important, because there's a tier above very rare that I've started to see that are called legendary or ancestral. So there's, instead of there being commons, uncommons, rare, very rare, 4 levels, it looks like there's probably 6 if not more levels of rarity on items, but the number of items in each of those categories is really small. I wouldn't be surprised if there's less than a dozen common items in the entire game, and you're not likely to get that many items anyways. Oddly, the trinkets and items are not that valuable either when you try to sell them, which having gold probably is a lot better. So like the number one thing that would have changed my experience with Darkest Dungeon would have been known to know the trick to snuff out the light and get a whole bunch more gold in the first 10 hours, and just having a ridiculous amount of gold would help quite a bit. But you still gotta do the things I am doing, which is upgrade the attack weapons, the armor defense, and the skills, and upgrade your recruitment caravan so that you start getting level 4 characters who have all their skills by default for free upgraded, and their weapons and armor by default for free upgraded to the max level. But that still doesn't save the problem that as you're working to upgrade those buildings and get the material to upgrade those buildings, you are going to inevitably level up at least 8 characters that you're going to have to pay through the nose to upgrade. Negate the effects of all face-up character. Okay. I might be able to win here still. Do I have anything else to say about as far as the accountability section, what I've been doing the past couple of days? I don't think I really spent a lot of time watching any TV, so I made some progress in that. Still making some final touches and just burn-in tests on my Raspberry Pi guest Wi-Fi. Since I was making 2 of them, I copied over the operating system to another micro SD card and made some slight changes there as far as what the settings were, and now leaving it running to do some burn-in tests on that, just to do it as best as I hope I can. Yeah, there is still definitely a feeling that I could go fairly far into this development process and kind of fail miserably, or find that I missed something. You just really can't test it all. Okay, so the hope here is that even though we know all face-up cards on the field's abilities are going to be negated, is that I can trigger enough special summons to activate this. Which I don't know if I really can do that. You can at least play a little bit for safety and put this in a defense mode. You can try and activate this ability. That won't work. Okay, so that didn't work. Unless he special summons something. During the main phase, if your opponent normal special summons 5 or more monsters this turn, I see. So nothing I would have done would have triggered this anyways. This only counters if they summon a bunch of things. In this, you pay 1,000 life points, but this stays on the field. Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't really have anything else that I worked on. Darkest Dungeon really has just been sucking all my time away, making hour and 40-minute long episodes. I'm just really trying to put in the time to wrap that game up. But I honestly don't think I'm going to finish it on any real success. Like, it feels like I'd have to put another 60 hours into it. And even then, odds seem low. And boy, am I not motivated to potentially play a Darkest Dungeon 2. It'll be interesting to see if there is perhaps a higher level of quality to a Darkest Dungeon 2, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is just like the same fans that like Darkest Dungeon 1 coming back with some 5% drop off to 50% drop off. And Darkest Dungeon may very well, almost certainly was another one of those Giant Bomb games that people at Giant Bomb were talking about. And that led me to believe that people were more interested in the game than it seems like I think people really were. The problem is, and you can even see it this year, and it's probably best just to look at this year, is that if you're following Giant Bomb, if you're following any mainstream video game journal site, you're going to think that there's a lot of hype around a lot of games, particularly if you're also directly involving yourself or watching propaganda / advertising for games. Microsoft would have you believe Sea of Thieves is super popular, if you believe them, but it really isn't, as far as I can tell. Then you compare that to what people actually are talking about, which is Elden Ring, and pretty much only Elden Ring. And you get a very different picture of where the enthusiasm was this year. There is also, I think, fairly obviously a level of artificial lack of interest. No, not lack of interest. There's a level of artificial interest in Marvel Snap. I've heard too many people, mainstream video game journalists, talk about it and basically advertise it, and too many people being really super happy with it compared to just average people not having that much to say about it. I did subscribe to like Angry Joe to see if maybe he would be a reasonable source, and I would definitely put Angry Joe in the category of being a YouTube mainstream video game journalist at this point, and he's talking about Marvel Snap, and specifically his attempt at a review wasn't really good because it was factually incorrect and contradictory in some points, but just also I don't think Angry Joe is really a good reviewer, and that's almost certainly why I unsubscribed from him. The last time I was subscribed from him is that that his persona of being angry only works as a scripted idea, and does not work as an actual personality trait. Like, I don't personally, and I don't think too many people actually do, want to watch somebody who is like Twitch streaming and yelling and getting mad at a video game. That's not something I'm interested in. Also, Angry Video Game Nerd, same issue, certainly. In a funny way, Angry Joe and Angry Video Nerd both come off as that they don't play that much games and they don't care. And one definitely seems like they probably copied the other at some point or was influenced by the other. Video Game Donkey is a different news source, and he talks about Bayonetta 3, and while he did have some nice things to say about Bayonetta 3, he also said that a lot of the game is distracted and getting away from the main gameplay mechanics to have side activities, and which, yeah, that could be a problem. Certainly, I could see that happening. There was a Space Harrier section that was a nice little break from the action in the first game. If people took the lesson that, well, people really enjoyed that side action break so much that became half the game, that could be a problem. Video Game Donkey also said the story is too ridiculous even for the ridiculous stories of Bayonetta, which, ooh, that could be a problem too. So, like, it'll be interesting to see if any other sources, of which I have very few of reviews, come out. He did confirm the suspicion that it was a multiverse. It's a multiverse game, so there are different Bayonettas from different universes. That would have been almost certainly how you could have had the original voice actress come into the game for one session. I almost wonder if the plan of having the game as a multiverse game came from the idea of not getting the original voice actress back. Like, effectively, I think Bayonetta 3 is made by a new team, or at least a half new team. So they're trying to emulate something that wasn't their original creation, and they're maybe trying to put their own twists. Are we outside of the duel window? Nope. We should be ranking up. Yeah. Win and you'll gain a rank. Lose and he'll lose a rank. So yeah. I look forward to more Bayonetta 3 reviews. Like, Black Friday is not but maybe a week or two away, and like, I'm really trying to look here to not really buy anything. I really don't have anything on my list. Notably, I bought a Switch last year, and I've not had the time or interest in really playing it. I could certainly make an argument to try and buy a couple of Nintendo Switch games, since I really only have one game anyways, and that's kind of the problem, but also I just don't have the time. Like, so, like, it would be silly to get something like Luigi's Mansion or some of the older games unless they're just really discounted. And I haven't really seen many Black Friday deals that look like they would be anything. In fact, it's been probably 4 or 5 years since there was ever any good deal during Black Friday. They've got so many tricks, so many different versions of what is being sold, that engaging with Black Friday in a physical form is insane at this point, and even engaging it on a digital form is kind of crazy. Amazon Prime Day will try to have yet another, like, third Prime sale, but I plan to not engage with that at all. I don't plan to look at the sales or anything like that. They'd have to do something pretty enticing, like store credit on, like, a store card or a free gift card or something, before I would even begin to consider engaging with Prime Day again. And inevitably there's always more stuff that you might want to buy or need to buy, but I'm in a pretty good position right now. It's gotten a little too rainy, which will lead into it becoming a little too cold for me to work on my irrigation system this season. And so, effectively, any outside activities, as far as projects, are shut down for the winter. So, yeah. I will mention and keep an eye on Slick Deals. Inevitably, though, I think companies are just reeling, so there is this thought in capitalism that if a company was struggling to make money, they would sell their products for cheaper and get desperate and put them on sale. But the truth is, it really does not happen like that anymore. It may have happened in the old days of a general store and mom and pop shops in the even, I would say, 80s and early 90s. But the way accounting is nowadays, it's just way easier for most of big corporations to lay off people. There's been tons of layoffs in the tech sector, including Twitter, but also other companies like Facebook are laying off like 11,000 employees. That, like, if Walmart is not seeing its sales rise at Walmart for Black Friday, if GameStop is not making enough profit selling games, they're not going to make the products cheaper. They're just going to shut down stores and lay off people, which is going to have people with less money, which is going to lead to a death spiral of there being less money in the economy, thus less people to purchase things. Rich people, the CEOs of Walmart and GameStop, aren't going to Walmart and GameStop and spending their money there. So the concept of a Black Friday deal really doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, this has very little to do with video games, but it's kind of important to point out that the way accounting is done now, the generally accepted accounting procedures that people are doing now, is just so out of line with reality that there's no possible way you can suspect that businesses are being run at all around the ideas of making products and selling products. Businesses now are built around the idea of recurring revenue and acquiring customers that then they could get the information off of for like Facebook and Twitter, things like that. But even Walmart, even CVS, like why does CVS have these ridiculous long receipts? Why does it ask for your phone number? It's because they are selling their customers as products to track them and do more advertising. They are not in the business of selling products. They are in the business of increasing user base. So yeah, maybe that's a long way of saying the economy is broken, and maybe Black Friday was always kind of a joke and a trick. It definitely is not the best time to buy everything, at the very least. There are many, many better times throughout the year where you're likely to get a better deal on specific items. Alright, well, let's go through the video game news. Prince of Persia remake not being cancelled. We already had talked about that. Activision confirming a full premium Call of Duty release planned for 2023. That's old news. Well, months later, after Rockstar when did Take-Two buy Rockstar? Maybe I'm confusing Take-Two with 2K. Yeah, I probably am. Take-Two says that the Grand Theft Auto 6 leak won't have any influence on development. Almost certainly it will have some small influence, but not much. At the very least, it would have influence on the security procedures of how you keep your files safe. but it's kind of a like obvious point that you really wouldn't change things just because leaks came out, and you might change things if leaks came out and people gave feedback, but the default response would be to say we're suing this person, we got the leaker, and now we're back to doing exactly what we were planning on doing anyways. I don't expect the GTA 6 will be much different from GTA 5. Past actions pretty much assumes that it will be full of a casino-like gambling aspect, and it'll be like Red Dead Redemption with a major online component for no good reason. And it is perhaps an interesting question to think if you can make a GTA game that really makes a lot of sense in modern time, 2022. Ooh, I guess you just cannot flip summon something like this that's face down. Can you? I bet you can't. In a lot of ways, there's just no reason why you would really care about GTA 6 until it actually comes out. And I do suspect that there's a lot of reason to not really care about GTA 6 even then. The thing that you would have wanted to see and that didn't happen was for Red Dead Redemption 1, which is not really a great game that people even want to play, but it just needed to happen that Red Dead Redemption Run needed to get a remaster, and it didn't. And so like the Red Dead series, which I think the first game was Red Dead Revolver, was the actual name of it. Of those 3 games, people only remember the second game, and they made then the third game. Do I want to do something here? After the fact. You attack face here. You attack here. You attack here. Anyway, okay. Inherently also, I guess it's worth pointing out, yeah, the remakes of Grand Theft Auto or remasters of Grand Theft Auto previous games were awful, which that was something they needed to really get right, and they never did, and they never really corrected that, as far as I ever heard. Plus, there kind of needs to be a remake of the first game, and I know the first Grand Theft Auto game just has no story, and is just a top-down, like, really, really old PC game. But they could certainly jump into that to a certain level also. Make it a mobile game remake. If you can't make it a AAA game remake. Or you just make a game called the remaster of Grand Theft Auto 1, and you just throw some story into it. If it were a case that you remade Grand Theft Auto 1 as a mobile game that was just being played top down, and then you zoomed out to reveal that it was some of the favorite characters from GTA 5 actually playing the game, even that would kind of work in my mind. Alright, let's move on though. We need to burn through news fairly quickly here. I started not super late today, but a little late. I also did some more research on YouTube Shorts, I should say, and it seems like YouTube Shorts are suggested to people in a wider time frame than I thought. I thought the general idea of YouTube Shorts was to be within a day or two, the short would get put out and then it would just not even be considered to be promoted otherwise. For the ones that are actually being suggested to me, that does seemed like that was the case, but maybe it is just a case you just don't get repeats in YouTube Shorts. So I'm seeing a lot of shorts from videos that are fairly old. So I have seen some of my YouTube Shorts get a few large numbers, a couple hundred views, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I am getting suggested more and more, but I don't think that's really what's happening. I think the YouTube Shorts that are coming out today are not really getting suggested that much, and so when I tried to scroll through it, yeah, I do have a lot of YouTube Shorts that just have 0 views, and a couple that have a couple hundred, which really confuses the issue as to what convinces somebody to watch a YouTube Short. The best I can figure is almost every YouTube Short has a face of a human, and it is just a case that humans want to see humans. So making a YouTube Short that shows a website of Steam of a video game only works if the YouTube Short starts on a thumbnail or auto creates a thumbnail on a face that's shown during the trailer of that game. There's not really much I could do there. I don't think you can even put custom thumbnails on YouTube Shorts. If I could, there might be a thought there. Of course, I'd need an artist to do that. JJ the Nico is back. I believe I've seen him on the chat before. He says Baron in D/D/D. I have no idea what that means. It's a question mark, but I couldn't answer it as a question because I have no idea what you mean by Baron or D/D/D. So, sorry, can't respond there. Video Game Chronicles says Overwatch 2 has toppled 35 million players in its first month. People are talking about Overwatch 2, but not really in positive terms from what I've heard. At this point also, I am just willing to give up on trying to correct myself as far as whether the website is Video Games Chronicle or Video Game Chronicles or whatever. There's an S somewhere in there. JJ the Nico says D/D/D is the deck you're facing. Yeah, I don't pay any attention. And Baron is the synchro monster. Okay, so it's commentary on what the opponent was playing, and I don't pay any attention to what the opponent is doing. They could be doing anything up there for all I care. I'm just going to play the cards that I can play and react when I can react, and that works at least to a certain extent. Obviously that means I'm not learning a lot, but I also don't have any crafting points in this game, which if Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Master was going to improve itself in any way for the free-to-play players, it would be create a better system in which I could craft new cards so that I have a chance of trying different decks. Moving on, Switch has hit 114 million as Nintendo lowers its sales forecast. It feels like they are recognizing that the Switch has probably hit a saturation point. Also, I saw another article that said PC gaming in the last 3 years in Japan has tripled. So, with a kind of decline in interest in the PlayStation 5 because of a lack of availability, probably more than anything else in Japan, the people have moved over more to PC gaming. Inherently, PC gaming, I think, is just more doable now in Japan. The products are more available in Japan. The products are smaller. The shelves in Japan, colloquially, are just small. Like, they don't have shelves in big, giant, big box Best Buy type stores where you would have a giant tower computer for sale, or a whole row of tower computers. You're not going to have a Walmart Supercenter type place in Japan. And compound that, the shelves inside of the tiny Japanese apartments are small, if you even have shelves. So trying to squeeze a giant computer into your apartment is a major commitment. That's why when you see in the few depictions of anime, when you see somebody who is into computers, the computers always have this feeling of overtaking the entire room and being such a major part of that person's lives. Serial Experiments Lane, which is a very old anime, takes that to a very far extreme, where you have this teenage girl that gets into computers and the internet before really there even was a computers and the internet, was when this was written. And she starts off with just like the smallest of computers in a corner of a room, and very quickly it just grows until the entire room is completely dark and it's only lit by multiple monitors and there's cords all over the place. And yeah, I'm into computers and I've got quite a lot of computers, but they are not overwhelming my house so much. If anything, there's more computerized things all throughout the house, but they're not giant towers. The idea of going to mini ITX is much more doable also for PC building now than it was ever before. And computers and computer cases are getting smaller and smaller because of that. And I imagine that is in part also leading to PC gaming being more acceptable amongst Japanese players. There is a slight concern, though, with the slight disconnect that happens around PC. What am I? Yeah, I'm rambling here. This is what I keep doing at Darkest Dungeon, is I lose my train of thought and then I just start rambling. I'm mentally exhausted. Alright, let's do this. I am increasingly losing the thought that I was having as I sit here. Oh, the point I was trying to make is I have a slight concern around the fact that the 490s video cards, which are giant and definitely wouldn't fit in the ITX, are going to like this 12 volt voltage because they just need so much power. in that the connectors are not seemingly as safe as they should be to connect to 12 volt power. Well, at that same level, 12 volt power for many ITX motherboards was becoming the kind of standard for it, instead of having 5 volts or 3.3 volts or even 1.8 or 1.3 volts, whatever it even goes down to, for the entire computer. So you could see a generational aspect happen where Mini ITX becomes the de facto new standard for the size and shape of computers, desktop computers, and yet the desire to have stronger CPUs and GPU performance would create a demand for more power to go through a Mini ITX motherboard. And you really can't serve those two opposing desires well. It just really isn't going to work. Part of the problem, I think, for the 4090 is that those 12 volt connectors that they're trying to use are trying to be plasticky, old school internal PC component connectors, when they probably should be much closer to thick gauge power wires, closer to what a power plug would be. At a certain point, maybe the power supply should just be in the 4090. But yeah, had they put just a DC barrel jack of power and just 12 volt DC to DC barrel jack connectors into it, instead of trying to get fancy, that might have worked. Or, you know, what they could have also done is they could probably try even doing 12 volts over USB-C. It just depends on the wattage there. That's probably not good enough for USB-C. But that kind of would make sense to use USB-C cords to deliver power, if not data, internally as much as externally. One cable to rule them all. I am going to try and speed up this process and summon this. Then I probably need to look and see if I've gotten all the daily quests done. I don't feel like I had a Duel Live watch ability today or last evening, which I find that interesting. Let's go ahead and I guess summon this guy. And then summon so just take that victory. We're getting a lot of connection failures, so they may have introduced a new problem. I really haven't had any trouble with my network too much lately. Power cuts have caused problems. But that's about it. There maybe is some points where I've seen the YouTube Advanced seems like it is getting worse and worse as YouTube updates itself, and it's not being updated to support that. So eventually, I'm sure YouTube will introduce something that adds ads back into YouTube Advanced. Yeah. So we got all the daily quests done. But yeah, I've seen YouTube Advanced hang up on my phone and crash, but I can't really say that's a network issue so much. Otherwise, my network has worked perfectly fine. Or well enough. The idea of watching a 2-hour movie streaming and having any potential that it messes up and you have to load or pause is the thing I'm trying to avoid, certainly. And that highlights the problems with like mid-roll ads and like Netflix's cheaper tier of having mid-roll ads is just not something that is reasonable for me. I don't want commercials in the middle. Even if I did have to watch 5 minutes of commercials at the beginning, I would prefer that by far. And that would be certainly if I ever get monetized and get 1,000 subscribers. My goal is that I don't want mid-roll ads really in my videos. I may at some point be desperate, may actually need the money, so I can't 100% promise I never do mid-roll ads, but I can say that I recognize and hate them, so I wouldn't try to inflict that on any of my viewers, even if arguably some of my videos are 2 hours or longer. Yeah. Moving on. Nintendo is establishing a joint venture company with a mobile firm of DNA. DNA was behind most of Nintendo's mobile games, including Mario Run and Fire Emblem Heroes. None of those mobile games really succeeded greatly. You would think with the absolute lack of competition on mobile games that that would be a great success on mobile, but it really wasn't. Apparently Fire Emblem Heroes, looking at this chart, sold significantly more than the Mario Kart game or the Animal Crossing game that I didn't even know really existed, or whatever. Was it Draguga Lost? Super Mario Run, Dr. Mario World, again, not one I even knew existed. And I guess some of the Pokemon games like Magikarp Jump and Pokemon Go are all not really direct Nintendo games, so they wouldn't be counted in that chart. Pokemon Go particularly. Magikarp Jump also being like one of the lowest Pokemon games on mobile. Nintendo's really dropping the ball on mobile when the solution is just the one thing they don't want to do, which is just put out an emulator that's the official emulator that lets you play ROMs of Nintendo games. I mean, that's all you really gotta do. Like, put Super Mario Bros. 1, put Donkey Kong, Super Mario Bros. 3. Just get the NES games to start on a mobile emulator and make it the official advertised app to use, and people would be happy with that on their cell phones. Give the ROMs free for the Nintendo Online subscription, since you're giving those ROMs for free anyways. I know they want to do new things and different things, but they need to walk before they run. The other thing they certainly could do is if Nintendo outright owns the rights to like the Super Mario Brothers show, the very old cartoons like that, the Zelda show, some of those awful things, the Pokemon TV shows. Promote those shows and make a Nintendo TV, a Nintendo Tube of some sort. And that would be fine to have a Twitch like competitor specifically with family friendly content for Nintendo fans. And then every now and then you could bring in like paid gamers to be Twitch streamers that know they're working with Nintendo and know that that they have to be super squeaky clean. Like, I could see getting somebody like Captain Sparkles to just play different Nintendo games on this special app, on this special streaming service. Plenty of parents would love to have their kids watch something like YouTube or Twitch without actually going to the Wild West that is YouTube and Twitch. Should Nintendo have sided with a different company as far as a mobile company? I guess is a good question to ask. Nah, not really. I imagine DNA understands that Nintendo, as a Japanese company, wants to do whatever it wants to do, and they want DNA to just be their little slave and follow orders. And once Nintendo establishes those relationships with the companies that they work with, they tend to want to keep those relationships pretty well and abuse those relationships for as long as possible. This is almost certainly what happened, generally speaking, with Rare. Almost certainly what happened with the Metroid Prime creators and Metroid as a series in general. It's just Nintendo is a user, as it is, and an abuser of their products and their IP and their companies that they side with, and that's just the price of doing business with a successful company like Nintendo. So yeah, I can't really name another company you'd want to do business with. Otherwise, you could do like King and get in bed with Activision Blizzard King, but Nintendo probably wouldn't do that. The Candy Crush people is King, or the Angry Birds people, you could have gotten in bed with them too, but you certainly aren't going to get in bed with like Shift Up or the makers of Genshin Impact, or what is it, Arknights. Like, some of the bigger, more recognizable companies are doing their own thing and wouldn't want to bow to Nintendo just for their IPs and their characters. And honestly, I have no idea what you really would do with Mario in a new mobile game anyways, and obviously they don't know what to do with him either. Mobile phones are just not really designed well for gaming at the core. That's why idle gaming is the only thing I really play on mobile phones. I guess maybe you could make a card game around Mario characters, and that might work. Yeah, I could see them turning Marvel Snap into a Nintendo character game. Anyways, moving on. The Forgotten Land is reportedly now the best-selling Kirby game ever, which I think that, if that is true, is probably mostly due to the fact that Kirby has always been relegated to being a B-tier character in a B-tier series. And most of the Kirby games have been Game Boy games, so bringing him and Game Boy games just were never as expensive, so it would be hard for them to make the same amount of money. Like Kirby's Dream Land was a Game Boy game, and honestly, Kirby's Dream Land and Forgotten Land are probably the only two I can even remember or think of. Steam database update seemingly confirms the Returnal PC. Following months of speculation, the name Returnal was added to a PC entry on Tuesday. I thought this had already been confirmed a long time ago. Isn't Returnal on the Epic Games Store already? I guess not. That's really a sad statement, is that unless you actively try to go and play a game like Returnal, in my mind, I would have just assumed it was either an Epic Games Store exclusive or that it was already on Steam. If anything, this shocks me because that means all the gameplay footage I've seen of Returnal has been captured off of a PlayStation 5 or streamed off a PlayStation 5. And I've seen a decent amount of footage of the game. Speedrunners like Returnal. I don't think I particularly would want to play Returnal. And honestly, any kind of roguelike at this point after playing Darkest Dungeon is not going to be on the table for a while. AEW Fight Forever may be on Xbox Game Pass on day one, it's been claimed. I don't know if any of these characters were involved with the most recent controversy around AEW, and I can't really explain the most recent controversy around AEW, but best as I figured it, and this was several weeks ago, there was apparently this idea that some wrestlers were really going to jump and beat up some other wrestlers for real. Just a straight shoot, no kayfabe. To use phrases that I probably don't have any knowledge of or shouldn't use. That there was like a real fight happening in the background when the cameras weren't on, or that there was going to be something like that, and so they decided to strike first some of the wrestlers, and I think at some point somebody bit somebody, and it led to several people being suspended, and that's probably not even accurate what I just said, but that's the general gist of what I had heard. It was a fairly big deal for a while, but it doesn't seem like it's probably had any real ripples as far as AEW games. I'm fairly certain it was an AEW event and AEW people that were in the fight. I guess for fair and balanced news reporting, I also just heard that the wrestler in the WWE that plays Kane, apparently somebody like tried to break into his house or something, and I don't remember the story. This was months ago. Somebody tried to break into his house or rob him or attack him or his family, and Kane did the thing that every gun owner fantasizes about, which is he got in a car chase, chased after the person, and shot the person, only for it to be revealed after the fact that he actually shot the wrong person. So he's been in jail for a while, and they just now released him on like bail or bond, which, if anything, this may be the first instance of somebody being a minor celebrity or being somewhat rich actually kept in jail for a reasonable reason, in my mind, as they might actually be a violent person. The real concern I would have, even if there's no way to legally claim it, would be that Kane very possibly has brain injuries, and that led to a heightened aggression and poor decision making that led to him chasing somebody and shooting them. But I think the chase in particular is the egregious part there. Had he simply shot him in the house, he probably wouldn't have been in jail at all, defending his castle with the dumb castle doctrine line of thinking, which in some states is law. In some states, I don't think it is law. So yeah, there's been all kinds of controversies, and certainly WWE is really just falling apart around controversies. I would have liked to hear more about like Vince McMahon having affairs and stealing money, but I bet that is going to be a long court case in which WWE is going to try and claw back a lot of laundered money or stolen money from Vince McMahon. And if anything actually changes as far as WWE with Triple H being in charge, which probably wouldn't, I'd be surprised. Let's see. I need to move faster. I'm rambling and getting off topic. Marvel Snap Season 2 Warriors of Wakanda is now live. The movie Wakanda Forever is either about to be out or out now, so this lines up with that. So, with Season 2, you may very well have lost any opportunity to get Miles Morales, the Miles Morales skin, or the Miles Morales card, if Miles Morales is actually a different card from the Spider-Man card. That was one of the things that Angry Joe said you could only get it if you paid for the Season Pass 1, and I don't know if that's really true or not. I think it's probably not true. If it is, then this is the other shoe that drops, which is to say, most people probably still have not even heard of Marvel Snap, and they are already too late to the party. Being told that we're already in the Season 2 of a Season Pass, of a Battle Pass, it's way too early for this. I was expecting at least 30 days of Season 1 switching around like this. Now, the numbers are going to go up so high that potentially we'll be at Season 20 before 52 weeks have passed. And, yeah, I don't really agree with that. Maybe they rushed it for the Wakanda Forever movie, but then why do the Miles Morales Spider-Man launch event at all? Why not make that be its own separate thing, and just start with the Wakanda Forever tie-in? I don't even know how many new cards this season adds. 4 new locations and a new character card. So 1 card and 4 new locations. And yeah, Marvel Snap is more interested in their locations than anything, but they're going to run out of ideas on that fairly quickly. So yeah, them adding new content is not a terrible idea. Them adding new content around the idea that you need to every couple of weeks potentially pay for another battle pass is ridiculous. I think they are probably a little desperate to make some money because they were going to have loot boxes instead. And this is the real issue, is that in the beta, from what I hear, there were loot boxes and you just had to open loot boxes to get cards. It was just that standard business model in which the drop rates were probably going to be really garbage, and that they were going to try to get most people to put a lot of money in online gambling. There was enough of a pushback in the beta to make them change that, which is fine. You forced the company to change their plans, but did you force the company to change their attitude and their expectations? Almost certainly no. So now they're trying to find another gimmick to get as much revenue possible, as much money out of your pockets as possible. And it looks like they're trying to do this in what is a fairly obvious and jaded attempt of having far too many battle passes, or just like withholding content that definitely could have been there on day one. The number of cards in Marvel Snap is really small. And so I could have seen them have twice as many cards at launch and then wait a month to 3 months before putting out any new content at all. And that feels like that's kind of how Hearthstone went, where Hearthstone was just a good game and it let people like it and get used to it for a long time before they added a major expansion that added more cards and changed the rules. Let's see. EA apparently has ended the Project Cars series. Slightly Mad Studio staffs will be placed on other EA racing titles where possible. Basically, they're going to lay off some of those people. As a series, Project Cars, I don't think ever really succeeded well enough. There is a question, really, just how many racing game series should exist at all. If any, there should be a couple, but it really should just be like Mario Kart is the top tier car racing game, and it doesn't even have cars. And then things like Forza and Need for Speed should be the next two, because those are way recognizable names. And then everything else should just not exist. Or it should be in such a niche category that it's doing something very different, and not really just a racing game. Inherently, in game development, regardless of how well you get a car to drive or how nice you get a car to look, anytime you try to put cars in other games that aren't racing games, you have to dumb down their physics and dumb down their driving to fit the other games. Cyberpunk is a great example of that. Or in this new Saints Row reboot, the cars were just popping in and popping out all over the place. And I don't think making for a new Forza and making the cars drive better and look better even really connects to that same technology being used in something like a GTA or in the Saints Row reboot, because I wouldn't be surprised if the programming for those cars and the animation for those cars are done completely differently, since they are not the main focus. Capcom apparently is partnering with Tencent's Teamy for a new Monster Hunter game. It's a mobile title in development. This would have been Tencent's Call of Duty mobile studio. I don't know if I really trust Tencent. Most people don't. A lot of people don't, I'll say. Maybe not most. But Monster Hunter on mobile isn't the worst thought ever, as a concept. I'll leave it at that. Video Games Chronicle article next says Cyberpunk's 2077's latest update adds supports for AMD's FSR 2.1 upscaling. The PC and current gen versions can now theoretically benefit from better performance. Linux Tech Tips did a test. I don't think it was on FSR 2.1, but they did a test on DLSX, I think, which fakes the frame rate by doubling the frame rate, and can turn a 60 frames per second game to look visually like a 120 frames per second game. And the results on that, as far as they just had their employees test it and see what they like better, and a lot of people, a good percentage of people did like the 120 frames per second look better and felt like the game was more responsive when it actually literally could not be more responsive. Um, Although by creating the fake frames, they also were creating visual artifacts that you may or may not notice. So it's creating some problems instead of solely fixing problems. And interestingly, when they tried to take a 30 frames per second game and double it to 60 frames, nobody liked that. So you need more samples for that technology to actually work. Almost certainly, some generations of new games will have that technology. I think it was DLSX, Deep Learning, Super Sampling, Extreme, or something like that. That probably will be turned on in some games, in console games by default, and just not allowed to be turned off. The technology almost needs to be taken to the next level, where you create fake frames for 120 frames per second, and then you have the game actually running at, say, 80 frames per second or 100 frames per second, and when a frame comes in on time, you show the real frame, and if a frame doesn't come in on time, you show the fake frame. And so you start tossing out the fake frames for the real frames. That would probably be the next step on that idea. And maybe it already does that, who knows. Moving on, EU has launched an in-depth probe into the Microsoft's proposed Activision Blizzard acquisition. More detailed inquiry was opened, and competitions are competition concerns. Now, if this is a story that I think it is, basically this is phase 2, and it pretty much was always going to go to a phase 2. The EU wanted Microsoft to make some kind of promises, any promises, without the EU really promising anything in return as far as why they might skip a phase 2. Effectively, this just means Microsoft was not fast-tracked by making promises to the EU, which I don't know what the EU really would have wanted as a promise to skip this phase 2 of the process. Anyways, like Microsoft could say, well, all the European employees will keep their jobs, or all the European companies will stay in business for a certain number of years, but I don't know if even that is big enough. EU in particular likes to enforce its rules and regulations globally on global companies, so I wouldn't be surprised if the EU says, no, you also have to promise not to fire anybody in the United States or anywhere else in the world too, or that you have to keep all the user data in European servers under European law open for like European snooping. But yeah, I don't know what they wanted, if they wanted anything. If anything, this is just going to keep the process kind of open and visible. Whereas had Microsoft made some kind of backroom deal to skip phase 2, then we would be wondering what promises did they make, or what was the backroom deal. I think Microsoft still is completely confident that this acquisition will go through. Yeah. Or they just don't know what they're doing, which, how could anybody really know what they're doing trying to acquire such a big company? God of War Ragnarok Day 1 patch includes over 160 fixes, which arguably that's not that many, really. Like if 80 of those fixes are just little text misspellings or something, um, that could be kind of nothing. Let's see. I guess what you do here is you go, this dialogue list here is this tall, this cinematic list is this tall, and then the quest and progression list is a little bit taller, maybe twice as tall, and the gameplay list is about the same length, and then the combat list is a little bit longer, and then the equipment upgrade is short, and the user interface and user experience is kind of long. Stability and performance. Subcategories here are kind of confusing. Visual impact, what does that even mean? Audio, a lot of audio bugs, a lot of accessibility, localizations, and in PS4 and PS5 explicit. So no one category here stands out too much. User interface is a long list. The longest list is combat. Any day one patch is just going to be fixes of things people already knew were broken. What you would have to see for this to be really a relevant story would be that there would have to be reviews of the game complaining that it was really buggy. But the problem with that is that mainstream video game journalists get early access to games on the promise that they will make the stupid assumption that the game will be perfect and not buggy because of the day one patch. Game developers have created this lovely little catch-22 for themselves, in which mainstream video game journalists will never complain about the bugginess of a game because they're getting a early access version that doesn't have that patch, and then people who buy the game based on this false review and this lying about what your experience actually was in the game, in the early access version of the game, gets them more sales. Yeah. And I guess if I was going to run a video game website and have other people reviewing games, or if I was going to play early access games myself, you probably just need to create a system where you say, yeah, I ran into this many crashes, this many visual glitches, this many bugs on this early access version of this game. Please take this information knowing that there has been a promise from the developers of a day one patch that will fix all of this. But you have to talk about it, and you have to say it actually happened. You can't just lie and be an honest journalist at that point, and that's the problem is most video game journalists are not honest journalists. But you can't not mention it. The only games in the past couple of years that people have really mentioned the bugs on, and arguably they didn't even mention the bugs on Cyberpunk 2077 enough, was Cyberpunk and the Saints Row reboot. And the people that only complained about the Saints Row reboot really only complained about it because they couldn't actually get to the end of the game. And most game journalists don't even try to get to the end of the game, but what Saints Row was so buggy they couldn't even make progress in the game to have a reasonable experience. Moving on, Slightly Mad founder has hit out at EA after it accessed Project Cows. How are those numbers looking? Question mark. So I guess this is a slap back or clap back. What is that term? Let's see. Let's see. He founded Slightly Mad Studios in 2009 and led the company through its $30 million sale to Codemasters, which I thought Codemasters owned Project Cars, and I guess they did. A decade later, as well as EA acquired Codemasters in February of 2021. Oh yeah, I guess I forgot about that. So he sold it for 30 million, then EA bought it for 1.2 billion. How a company goes from 2019 being worth 30 million to 2021 being worth 1.2 billion, I have no idea. That's highlighting the insanity of the acquisition state of video game companies. So he left the company in October, last October, stating the time was right to step aside when the studio's future is now assured, which he was wrong about that, but almost certainly he got a nice little golden parachute. So he's taken the money and run. So there's really not so much of a reason for him to say anything, because I almost certainly got the money. On Tuesday, he tweeted, "EA, keep being awesome. I said my bit and I stand by every word as they continue to prove them." There's 160 workers that are being moved to other things. I guess keep being awesome here might be being sarcastic. How are those numbers? Sorry, I mean people with hopes and dreams and families looking at the bottom of those spreadsheets. So it's a comment more than just a clapback. He's upset that 160 people who he may be able to actually name personally, that's not that many people, are having their lives turned upside down by Project Cars being axed. That being said, Codemasters is better with the Dirt series as far as car games anyways, I would say. So it didn't really make a lot of sense that there was Project Cars and Dirt as a series, both run by Codemasters. I think they're both run by Codemasters. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of a different company. I don't think so. Codemasters also made the Overlord series, but I doubt we'll see another Overlord game, even though there is a new Pikmin game coming out. That whole series would probably need a reboot and may not really work with its dark humor. Oh, I really just need to burn through all this news way faster than this. I gotta figure out a better way to do this. It's taking far too long. I'm having real commentary and actual interest in the news stories, which is nice, but then that gets balanced out with just a certain level of boredom with a lot of the games that come out on Steam, even though that is also news that I should cover, and I know I should cover it. And then Yu-Gi-Oh! Certainly is also an issue of taking up a lot of time. 343 thanks fans for his patience, as Halo Infinite finally adds the long-awaited features. I guess I'll say check out this article if you're interested at Video Games Chronicles, because I don't care about Halo. There was a small point in which I would have cared about Halo with Halo Infinite, but that point would have required the game to be kind of a finished product and really well received, and honestly be new player friendly, which I don't know if there's any story in Halo Infinite at all that would onboard a new player. And I think if I was going to do Halo, I'd probably try to go through the whole Master Chief Collection and start with the first game and just try to rush through all the story of all the games, which is like 5 games. And that's really a lot of commitment. Moving on, apparently FIFA's first post-EA games will be blockchain titles. 4 Web3 games have been announced to coincide with the 2021 World Cup, seemingly being made by these companies, unless these are the names of the games. Hmm. 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 The idea that all four of them are going to be blockchain is just another highlighting of how little FIFA actually cares about their product in video games or their product at all. They really only care about money, and how corrupt FIFA and the Olympics organization and organizations like that really are. They're also having their FIFA World Cup in Qatar, so they obviously are getting a huge payout from that. Animal Crossing New Horizons is now the best selling game of all time in Japan. Let's see. It is reportedly topped the original Game Boy Pokemon games. I guess that may be the beginning of the end of Pokemon being as popular as it has been for decades. That being said, Animal Crossing is a very different game, and it definitely doesn't have quite the gotta catch 'em all idea. So I don't know if long running wise, if you compared the total sales of Pokemon games versus the total sales of Animal Crossing games, that there would be any comparison at all. Almost certainly Pokemon games have and will for a long time still be much better selling as a series, and there's definitely way less merchandising around Animal Crossing than Pokemon. But I definitely could see a generation of kids 10, 20, 30 years from now being more interested in Animal Crossing than Pokemon. I keep thinking at some point Pokemon would be the baby toy and kids would grow out of Pokemon, but they really didn't. So that old cliche of there being like cartoons or games or toys that kids would play with that they would feel they had grown out of, it seems like that's completely dead. In all fairness, previous generations to mine said video games and games were the baby toys, and that eventually you'd grow up and you'd be interested in working a job in the factory and reading the newspaper and getting into politics and reading books or something like that, and none of that really happened. And in all fairness, yeah, I don't think it ever actually works out that way. There are definitely some baby toys, though, but they have to be really, really early, actually, for baby toys, before a edgelord terrible 2 kid or an edgelord preteen teenager would say they're not interested in that. Also, even if you are a teenager and you say, well, I'm not into Pokemon now, you tend to get back into Pokemon after you stop being the emotional teenager and start to get nostalgic for it. EA predicts that Argentina will win the 2022 World Cup after getting the last 3 years right. Which I guess check out this article if you're interested. It's worth pointing out that Video Games Chronicles is a European country, and that's why they're talking about FIFA a little bit more than an American video game company, United States video game company would talk about it. Let's see. LEGO is no longer accepting Zelda fan submissions due to a license conflict. All submissions are instantly rejected, potentially indicating that a Zelda brick set is in the works somewhere. Which, yeah, I think that is the only assumption you can really make there. The fact that LEGO has been via their Lego ideas, which they've actually been doing worse and worse with the Lego idea submissions anyways. Fewer and fewer sets are getting approved. Most of the sets that are approved come out drastically different from what you're actually voting on as a concept anyways, so the system never really worked that great anyways. Some of the Lego idea sets have been really great, but also a lot of the Lego idea sets just get rejected. And in a lot of ways, the Lego Ideas website is just a website where people submit their ideas so that people aren't submitting their ideas somewhere else and Lego can control the process. You can always make your own my own creations like what is being shown here. Now, inherently, looking at this my own creation, this is Lego Breath of the Wild, and as someone who hasn't actually gotten to the castle in Breath of the Wild, I don't really recognize anything particularly special around this castle. I assume it's Hyrule Castle. I don't know if this is supposed to be Ganondorf or not. I know that this is one of the robots, and this is one of the trolls from the game. And I had heard there was a motorcycle in Breath of the Wild, but it is definitely the blue Link and the blue Zelda outfits, which just does not feel like Link and Zelda. It doesn't really look like Link and Zelda to me. And so I don't see anything here. As somebody who's actually trying not to buy any more Lego for a while, I have plenty of Lego and not enough time to put it together. I don't see anything here that's that interesting. A giant castle is great and all, but there was a giant Disney castle set that I skipped on, and that would have been much more interesting and much prettier looking than the grays and dark pieces of this. This looks a lot like a Lord of the Rings style castle. If you told me that this was from Lord of the Rings and you just clipped out all the Zelda stuff on the edges in this, I would believe you. The giant playset type ideas of giant castles doesn't really work. It gets away from being minifig scale really when you have giant buildings. Nobody's going to have a table that would have been big enough to hold this, because this is probably 4 or 5 feet tall. Looking at these pieces, you would have to try and scale everything down and probably lose a whole middle tier for this to be displayable. And I just don't know what else you would build around Zelda Breath of the Wild in particular. If anything, you'd probably want to do it at a micro scale and try to do a map of the whole world. And even at a micro scale, that probably would be a lot of pieces. And it still would probably be too big. None of the shrines in Breath of the Wild are interesting enough that you'd have a set around that, unless you're trying to add Zelda to Mario Jump, and even then that probably wouldn't work too well. So let's take the next step and assume that Lego has gotten the license from Nintendo to do Zelda, which makes sense. Nintendo has done the license for Mario, so you would do Zelda next. Now, inherently, Nintendo doesn't solely own Pokemon, so there are Pokemon construction brick sets, but they're not made by Lego. They're made by another manufacturer that I don't think makes as good of bricks, and arguably even Lego's bricks break a little too easily sometimes, depending on what color they are and what chemicals they've got in the manufacturing process. Brown bricks were really bad for a while, and I have some sets that all the pieces that were brown broke, and I'm not sure that they've ever fixed that problem with new chemical processes. They're also trying to move to plant-based plastics, but it's going to be a slow process to be able to find plant-based petroleum substitute plastics that also don't break too quickly. Yeah. So yeah, I was saying, if they do have the Zelda license, you almost certainly will see Zelda sets for the Mario Jump. Is it called Mario Jump? The little Mario sets they were selling with the little Bluetooth enabled character that is all square, that Mario. That whole series was awful, and I don't think kids really stuck with it that long. So I could see also abandoning that set, but maybe not. Otherwise, I think you probably are going to have either a flat picture with the Lego Dots series of Zelda and Link, and the sword, Master Sword, and Shield, and or the Triforce, or even the Ocarina from Ocarina of Time. Any of those could be a possibility. It could just be a collection of Lego Dots. We've got the license to show these, to let you build these Lego Dot posters effectively out of Lego and put them on your wall. That would be very easy to do. Or you are going to maybe do a map of the first game, which that visually wouldn't look that interesting. You could do a map of the first game and then play some kind of board game, but I don't think they'll get that complicated. But yeah, I think they're going to go back to the original Link. You're going to see Legend of Zelda 1, Legend of Zelda 2 if they do any set. It's not going to be so much Breath of the Wild, unless Nintendo just really wants it to be the Blue Link. I could see it just being a series of different Links and different costumes. And here's the Breath of the Wild, here's the Wind Waker Link, here's this one and this one. And I don't know how you'd make the Wind Waker Link look much different than any of the other Links. But there's really not a location other than Hyrule Castle in the Zelda series that's consistent. There are items that are iconic, like the Master Sword and the Shield and all that I just named. And there's some characters that are iconic, but they wouldn't look that good as minifigs. But there's really no location. And without a location, you don't have a building. And without a building, you don't really have a Lego set. Because you need to build something. Yeah. And I guess I have to take that mental journey just to that point. Like, if you're going to make a giant Bowser like this, which this was an insane set, it's far too expensive. It looks nice, but it's too big. It doesn't match with anything. It only sort of connects to the other Nintendo Lego sets. It highlights scale issues. Bowser is always big, but he kind of needs to be scaled down. And remember, before this set, there was the giant question mark block, so I could see there being maybe a giant square with a Master Sword in the top of it. Although the Master Sword is usually in a triangle pedestal with the Triforce symbol on the floor. So yeah, here's a little guy that that Nintendo really pushed this idea of the electronic Mario that makes sounds, and so they connected it to that. I definitely would not be surprised if the Zelda license um, is literally just going to be a reskin of the Mario electronic character, and he'll just be Zelda going through the Mario levels. Inherently, too, you could also make the negative assumption that the license they're talking about is with Nintendo in general, where Nintendo has said our license in part to get Mario's content in Lego requires you not to have any other Nintendo content suggested or in the works. So it could very well be that the big Bowser, the Mario, the question mark block is the license they're talking about that would conflict with Zelda games or Zelda Lego idea submissions. Moving on. Street Fighter 6 has a button mashing control scheme that lets AI perform moves. We want something that makes a difference happen by randomly pressing buttons. That's an interesting idea. It's absolutely the wrong game to really introduce it with, though. Somebody, I guess, has to be the leader there, but you almost certainly have to say this button mashing scheme is never going to be playable in esports, and we're going to make sure it's always nerfed and balanced in a way that you can never use it in esports and win, which AI inherently implies that it would just get better and better and better to the point where button mashers might win entire esports tournaments, and that's a scary proposition, certainly. And Street Fighter as a series has been the established, this is what the esports fighters play type game, so them introducing that concept is crazy. They've also already done a crazy thing, certainly with Street Fighter 6, in that the logo looks very different. All the characters have aged and they all look very different. You look at this cast of characters, or I look at this cast of characters, even though some of these characters are people from Street Fighter 2 and recognizable, there's just a lot of characters that I don't recognize at all, that are either from Street Fighter 4, 5, or even Street Fighter 3. And I don't think most of these characters look the way they used to look. The whole art style is very, very far away from Street Fighter 2, which I really feel like the Street Fighter series would have been best, since Street Fighter 2 was so popular, at sticking at a flatter 2D animation look instead of going with a high flash, very busy power animations and 3D model characters. That being all said, as somebody who wants to get into fighting games, button mashing was almost certainly what I was going to do, and that won't probably help me get very good at playing any other fighting games, but it would be an interesting starting point to potentially be able to play Street Fighter 6 and get through the story mode on easy just by button mashing. My fingers, though, these days are getting worse, not better, as far as arthritis, so I think I probably wouldn't do well if I tried to play a fighting game anyways. The Doom Eternal composer accuses id Software director of lying about the original soundtrack's failure. Mick Gordon claims he was offered 6 figures to stay quiet about it, but refused. Here we have another controversy. I feel like this had already come up, though. This is getting reported by Video Games Chronicle like it's a brand new thing. but I feel like the Doom Eternal composer already had some kind of conflict with id Software. The soundtrack was included as part of the collector's edition game, promising lossless and uncompressed audio files featuring composer Mick Gordon's music. However, when the soundtrack was released, players complained that only 11 of the 59 tracks had been mixed by Gordon himself, while the rest had been mixed from music fragments taken from the game. Interesting. This I don't follow game soundtracks or music at all, but it is an interesting aspect to potentially making a video game soundtrack, that you would straight up have clips of music that would fade in, play for a few seconds, and then fade out, and you just wouldn't have a full complete song for 2 to 5 minutes of music. Yeah, in the old days, I guess that would be called a jingle. Yeah, in May of 2020, he posted a lengthy statement on Reddit claiming Gordon had delayed the soundtrack and under-delivered, forcing id to get the lead audio designer to make up the rest of the tracks. Okay, so this was the story. This is the issue. Obviously, there was a breakdown in which between Mick Gordon and Marty Stratton. And this is what I remember. Yeah, Marty Stratton, the studio director, claimed he had delayed the soundtrack and basically not finished the job. And so they had to bring somebody else to finish the job. Now, months later, years later, 2 years later, we're getting a response. Gordon has refuted Stratton's claim and is accusing him of not only lying about the situation, but also offering him six-figure sum to stay quiet about it. Which, yeah, I think the delay here makes it harder to believe the music composer over the studio director. But then also this may have just been in arbitration for 2 years secretly. He has certainly written a lot here with a 14,000 word statement. So unlike the Helena Taylor and Bayonetta's first voice actors situation, I think this guy is seeing how maybe that situation went and realized if he was going to make accusations, he needs to bring the receipts. And at least 14,000 words of claims that could be used against you in a civil court sets the stage that you're confident in what you're saying. If you're going to write 14,000 word statements, you probably should have a lawyer go over it. So we can't go over all of this. This would be a hour worth of it going over this. But he says it's a difficult project. He had apparently wanted 2 levels worth of music per month, which I don't know how long a composer takes to make a song, really. I've heard stories of some songs being done immediately in the studio. I think that's mostly a lie. I think people write the rhythms separately from the words very often, and the words often come at completely different times months later. I think you're just always writing, if you're a good musician, in your little black book as far as words and phrases, and if you're the composer, you're probably also writing notes and tunes and trying to listen to music like crazy. I imagine it is somewhat of a laid back experience, because most artistic experiences are somewhat laid back, and it's not a factory line experience where you're churning out music every single hour on the hour for days on end. Levels in Doom Eternal, having not played the game, if they're like the Doom reboot levels, are 15-20 minutes long. So if you need 15-20 minutes worth of music, that's quite a lot in a month. Plus, it's in the better way to look at this, it's inconsistent with the development time of what the game itself would have been. Doom Eternal almost certainly was in the works when the Doom reboot came out, and I think Doom Eternal was 3 or 4 years after the Doom reboot. I don't think it was a year later. And there were about 15 levels in the original Doom, I would say. So they're kind of asking for 7 months, even if you were to say 10 months of time for him to make all the music for the game. It would be my estimate, which just doesn't seem realistic. Why wouldn't you have him on retainer to be working on more Doom music after the Doom reboot all the way? He also says the continuing changing development of the game led to numerous rewrites and the need to constantly scrap submitted music. I don't know why the changing of the game would change the music that much. He rejected my belief that the schedule was flawed and suggested my act of trying to do something about it was a sign of incompetence. It sounds like the schedule was flawed. Like, even before I got to the sentence, it sounds like it. Yeah, it certainly is painting a picture as I'm scrolling down here. It definitely feels like it just boiled down to something personal, really. The actionable things here is he says he wasn't paid for 8 months until 8 months into the project, and then he wasn't paid for another 11 months. So they did keep him around for like 19 months. They really just wanted his name, it seems like, and didn't really want his work, or didn't want his working style. So yeah, you have a whole lot of things here that could be brought up in civil court, so he's not that afraid of being sued. So I kind of have a tendency to believe the composer here. This is also one of the longest articles we've seen from Video Games Chronicles, because Mick Gordon, the composer, added so much text and receipts, for lack of a better term, on the situation that could be reported on. This feels like actual journalism. I would hope that there was a little bit more checking and verifying. It may be very hard to find independent third-party sources to verify any of these facts, but certainly there would be communications, contracts, and emails that you could show to a news reporter to make sure that this isn't just a case of somebody lying. Now, it is a sad statement, certainly, that Helena Taylor came off as being just a total liar in the end, and I'm immediately now trusting Mick Gordon. Either that means I am subconsciously not learning my lesson to not trust people making accusations by default and just assume everybody is innocent until proven guilty, which it's worth pointing that out. Yeah, the accusation here that id Software did something wrong is an accusation, so we should definitely lean more on the innocent until proven guilty thought. However, it's really hard to do that when you're talking about a corporation in id Software, or just somebody who was in a position of power like the game director, because people in positions of power have proven themselves over and over again to be guilty over and over again. And I always like to side with the little man. Honestly, if Helena Taylor's claims had bore a little bit more weight, there I probably would have sided with her. A lot of people did, and I can't blame people for siding with her. I can kind of blame people now for still siding with her, if anybody is, if they are up to date and informed as far as the responses and the revelations. There is definitely a point here that maybe he is a slow worker, and maybe he is a bad worker as far as composing music. It is the same situation. I have no idea how long a music composer should take to make music. I don't know if it isn't fairly typical for music composers to not get paid but once a year. Maybe that is just the nature of their business. That sounds awful, to be only paid 8 months in and then not paid again until 11 months later. But that may be just the music industry. The music industry definitely sucks, even in video game development. So all of that may be true. We may very well get other composers coming out saying that they are treated that same way, or that they are way better composers and that they make a video game's levels worth of music way faster than that. Inherently, the first Doom's game soundtrack was really, really good. So there might be a misunderstanding here, or a desire to create generic video game music. Create very good music on the timeline of making generic video game music, because most video game music is pretty generic and boring intentionally. So maybe it does take a lot less effort and time to make that. But Doom Eternal music really needed to stand out and be much better. I do kind of not want to touch upon it, but I think it is worth pointing out. There is always that possibility of a gender bias too. Maybe I didn't trust the video game English voice actress Helena Taylor in her initial accusations because she was female, and maybe I overly trust Mick Gordon because he's male. I don't think I have those biases. I try to avoid and recognize those biases. Inherently, somebody is always going to claim you have those biases if they see the world that way and they see it as something that you can never get fully away from. But yeah, I guess it's worth pointing that out. Somebody will say that I'm just trusting the guy. Although in this case, I'm trusting the little guy against the studio director, who is the big guy. It could also certainly be more of a case that I trusted Platinum and Kojima a lot more, which I really have no reason to do that as far as the Bayonetta story. It will be a very interesting comparison, certainly. We are really getting almost an apples to apples comparison of a disgruntled employee spilling tea, letting the secrets loose, and making showing off how bad the industry probably is. Another point I want to make, though, is part of the thing of people quitting Twitter before they're even fired, or which, by the way, Elon Musk sold a bunch of his Tesla stock, I heard, so maybe Tesla will become a better company with Elon Musk being less involved in it. But yeah, the thing I wanted to say is video game people, IT people, probably came out of college and immediately entered the game industry, and and to use a cliche, they probably never worked a hard day's work in their lives. They've never been in factories. Maybe they were pizza delivery people as teenagers. Maybe they weren't. Honestly, if you can afford to go to a lot of California-based computer programming colleges, or if you're in California in general, you very possibly were never actually working in a Walmart. You've never worked in a factory. You've never done any kind of manual labor. A lot of kids, I imagine, are either paid through college and don't have to do anything at all and don't have to ever have a job, or they work as assistants to very rich people, and so they're doing more kind of secretarial assistant work than like blue collar work or no collar work. Um, so a lot of the complaints certainly around video game employees saying, oh, it's so bad in the video game industry, often should fall flat and do fall flat. As, oh, this guy was a jerk, oh god, this guy was mean, oh, they offered me a six-figure sum of money to stay silent about how badly I was treated. It really isn't that bad. Did the studio director like threaten you? Like, I heard a story of somebody, a boss, calling 911 and making a false report because an employee called in sick and basically tried to swat his employee for daring to call in sick. Like, there is some real insane stuff that gets done to a lot of people, if not the majority of people working in most regular jobs. The abuse is so high and it is just so normalized. It's incredibly crazy. So any complaints by voice actors or game programmers often really should just fall on deaf ears, because often these complaints are, oh, this person was kind of a jerk. And I think a lot of video game people just have never been in the real world. They've been raised in sheltered lives that they just don't realize that the world is full of jerks and most people are jerks. And you just have to get along with people or take it. And it's not right and it's not ideal, certainly, but it is reality. Of course, that doesn't change anything if you just accept, well, that's the way the world is. So I can't complain about people trying to make a change for the better either. So, but yeah, day to day, actual gamers who are actually working jobs or actually going to school and struggling in their lives should not hear as many of these stories and should not care about these stories. Honestly, we're coming to video games for escapism, and when a third or maybe closer to a sixth of all articles are about the video game industry being so awful, that's not helpful or for stress relief or escapism. Moving on, November's PlayStation Plus game catalog and classic titles have been announced. Let's see if we have a full list here before we just read the headline. Yeah, there's a long list here, like Kingdom Hearts games, a Skyrim Special Edition. A lot of these games I kind of would have assumed were already in the lineup. And this is PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium, whereas PlayStation Plus Premium only has like 5 games. If anything, I would say this list of getting just Skyrim now indicates that They are trying to build up this catalog, but I don't know if this catalog is permanent, or if these games go away. You'd want Skyrim Special Edition to be a permanent thing you always get as long as you have the service. It does indicate that PlayStation Plus Extra or Premium are trying to build up their catalog, assuming this is permanent. Unless it's been a case that they've had Elder Scrolls before, and then they took it away and now they're just adding it back. But these games are definitely old. There's nothing here that looks new. Onichambara Origin for the PS4 being added is kind of unique in that that's probably not a game that would have been approved and allowed on the PlayStation today, with Sony of California being in charge. Onichambara Origin is not particularly the most adult game ever, but it is a little lewd and very anime in the game. Interesting. The only link here is for the word Origin, which probably just takes me to Origin's online streaming service. So the links in these articles are being automatically made based on keywords. Let's see. Moving on, the delayed Switch exclusive sports story will be released in December. This is a golf story sequel including tennis finish, dungeons, minigames, and more. I don't recall this ever even being announced. Golf Story is a game I recognize as a name, but I couldn't really put a picture to it. Yeah. And compared to that thumbnail, I was not expecting what kind of looks like a Zelda-esque game. Does seem like there is some golfing to it, but it doesn't seem like you have to golf all the time. Well, there might be something to this series, but I would have to go back and investigate whether Golf Story even came to PC. And even if it did come to PC, this is a Switch exclusive, so I'd have to wait at least 6 months for it to stop being an exclusive. So no reason to give any attention to that at the moment. Let's see, the latest Nintendo Indie World Showcase includes over 20 games coming to Switch. 3 of the games featured at the presentation are being released today. So, Rogue Legacy 2, which is, I think, out now. Vinba, a little to the left. Blank from something just called Blank. Have a Nice Death. Once Upon a Jester. AKA. They really should put these in parentheses. Sports Story. Botany Manor. Goodbye World. Dogme, The Space for the Unbound for Majulkin. No, The Space for the Unbound is the name of the game. Coffee Talk Episode 2. Oni Road to the Mightiest Oni. I recognize that game. Desta, The Memories Between. People Grinder, Inscription. I recognize that game. Wobble Dogs. Wrestle Quest. Interesting. A wrestling RPG, Storyteller, Curse of the Sea Rats, and World of Horror. So 20 games named. I can recognize 2 of them because they are games that are coming out on PC and kind of big titles. And arguably Rogue Legacy 2 maybe is still technically an indie game, but it definitely wouldn't be a single A game, which is really what I'm thinking of when I hear indie. I don't really care if a game is actually being published by a publisher or whether it's being published by an indie developer. I care if it's more of a single A scope game that's going to be small versus a double A scope game that's going to be medium versus a triple A game that's going to be a large scale, large production budget game. Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2 details. If you want to check out this article at Video Games Chronicles, we're almost done with Video Games Chronicles, but seriously, we're 2 hours and 30 minutes into this also. I guess we have to get at least one Modern Warfare 2 article on Video Games Chronicles, but if it's only one, at least that's something. As far as more drama, the ousted Disco Elysium developers look set for a court battle with the studio owners. The devs allege that they were defrauded, while ZA/UM owners accuse the former employees of misconduct. This one is going to be a real fight that is immediately going to a court case. And the stakes of this court case may be fairly high. They may get money, they may get ownership of the company back. Although, in all fairness, the odds of somebody being ousted successfully and then them getting ownership of the company back is pretty low. You pretty much give up any chance of owning and keeping control of your company the second you sell even one share, even a tiny fraction of your company, because then you open the door. Eventually they'll pull some legal shenanigans or tricks. Eventually you'll have to sell more shares and more shares and more shares. And eventually you'll just inch by inch, paper cut by paper cut, lose total control of your business, and it will just destroy your business in the long run, as you lose control and as the focus of what the business planned on doing changes drastically from being a company that maybe makes a good game to being a company that just is trying to make as much profit as possible. Speaking of businesses going out, this has nothing to do with video games, but the movie Spirited Away, if you ever have the misfortune of watching it, because it's such an incredibly sad movie, has this tin that kind of looks like a tin of canned ham, which is like a square can with rounded edges. And in Japan, there was this candy maker that made this hard candy, and the hard candies were in the tin. This would have been before the idea of plastic packaging, certainly. Well, that company actually existed and actually made the candy, and the candy got fairly popular, but not that popular because the company, after I believe 114 years, is going out of business. It's not super crazy that Japanese companies are hundreds of years old. Nintendo is, I think, over 100 years old as a company. They get just passed down from generation to generation and really are family affairs most of the time. But yeah, I don't think that candy was ever actually that popular, that good, though. So, and I don't think that he sold much of anything else. If this was America, I wouldn't be surprised if that candy product gets purchased by, say, the manufacturers of Twix, which is super popular in Japan, and they license it and still put it out after the company itself is out of business. And more than likely, they went out of business mostly because of just a global recession and COVID lockdowns more than anything else. Twix is super popular in Japan. I would also point out, again, this has nothing to do with video games, because Twix is constantly adding different flavors that people want to try, and changing things up. Anyways, back to video game news. We're now at the Gematsu articles. Tactic Ogre Reborn has some information if you want to check out that article. a game called Glaciered. It has an action gameplay teaser trailer. I believe this is the game where you're this kind of alien-like bird creature that is in a ocean world that is frozen over. So, like, it's kind of like an ocean game, but you're more like this bird character, and instead of flying in the sky, you're just flying in the water. Which air is effectively a fluid, physics speaking wise. So there isn't much of a difference there. The only weirdness is that you have a character that at best you would describe as some kind of penguin-like creature that is a bird that's moved to swimming, or a fish that's moved to being adept at maybe flying. When you have a game like this, you assume there was probably a limitation in they just didn't want to draw a skybox, or they couldn't draw a skybox, or they didn't want you flying around in an open air environment where there just wouldn't be any items. It's not a terrible thought, honestly, to fly around the ocean where there will be rocks and fish and things that naturally seem reasonable to exist, as far as just making mountains and barriers to stop you from going a different direction. Let's see, you can see this bird-like creature is fighting a shark here that is moving probably way faster than a shark would, and in ways a shark would almost certainly not move. So yeah, I can't help at first glance to think about that this game may just be around a gimmick that's not even that interesting, and limitations of we don't want to render the sky or have a fully open sky environment. If all of the ocean was going to be frozen over on Earth, then that would be some weird anti-global warming thing. It'd be like Snowpiercer, where the humans in Snowpiercer tried to stop global warming and did it too well and caused everything to freeze. Let's see. Moving on, Project AK has been officially tied to Arid Chronicle Kazan G-Star, I guess, and it has a trailer. I don't recognize a Project AK. What company is this? Nexon and Meeple? I really don't have time to be watching trailers. So I'm seeing some dark imagery, seeing a giant bird creature. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a Dark Souls type game, because that's what I would just generally assume. Although if you told me this was actually a God of War game, I would be fairly excited about that too. Although I guess the question is just, what is a God of War game? The guy's all chained up. So the intro is him all being chained up. Okay. Well, that's got me a little excited about this game, but I don't recall anything about Project AK. They probably did announce it like a week ago to say that some game named Project AK has been announced, and it probably went in one year and out the other. Smartphone game here, Toa Sugai, launches February 16th in Japan. It looks like mobile phone game, gacha game if I was to assume. Couple raising battle fantasy RPGs, how they describe it. There was that game that was a couple raising game. Hmm. I don't know how you do couple raising though, and then you have multiple couples. I guess maybe it's a case that instead of one character being a separate entity, all characters are paired. It's not the worst idea. That probably helps with writing quite a bit, to say these two characters will always be in the same scene. Yeah, that's not a terrible thought. This is a Square Enix published game. There's an anime called Soul Hunter or Soul Eater or something where it was a couple. Every team had one person that could magically turn into a weapon, and then the other person magically had the power to control and strengthen the weapon. Although, even in that case, there was like a character named Death Jr. that had two characters that turned into two different guns. So that's why you could do something like that storyline wise, is if they synergize with each other. As for what the actual game is though, we'll probably need to see more information. Death Stranding and Death Stranding Director's Cuts combined reached 10 million players, which maybe that is a low number somewhat for such a big game and advertised game. Although, in all fairness, the actual gameplay and the weirdness around Death Stranding almost certainly turned off many players. I wouldn't be surprised if, had Death Stranding been more of a standard first-person shooter game and a little less weird, that it would have sold 15 or 20 million by now. You can't really prove that, but that would be my guess. Switch worldwide tops 114 million units sold, and then Splatoon 3 has sold 7.9 million copies of their game, which, yeah, those are big numbers. That's pretty much all you can say. We already talked about Nintendo and DNA establishing a joint company. Kart Rider Drift pre-season begins January 11th for PC, iOS, and Android. Kart Rider being spelled with a K, Kart Rider : Drift. I guess we look at this game on Steam and see if there's anything interesting here. It doesn't visually look bad as kind of a Mario Kart clone, so I'm going to make a special exception and give it a follow, but it could certainly be received pretty badly. Disgaea has its second trailer. I will leave it at that. You can check it out if you're interested. At Gamatsu. Teamy Studio and Group and Capcom co-developing a Monster Hunter game. Co-developing is almost certainly not really what ever happens. Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 has free updates launching November 9th. DLC Hero of Justice Pack 1 on November 10th. Okay. Good information. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet trailers, details, and screenshots are available if you want to check that out. Apparently these books are going to play a big role on something. You know, nobody ever talks about how incredibly dangerous it would be. Apparently Eevee has some kind of new evolution here, or attack. Yeah, it would just be insanely incredibly dangerous if Pokemon really existed and you had these monsters that could do massive attacks, like, and that they would actually obey orders of kids. Like, we're lucky in the real world that most kids don't even have vicious dogs that would listen to the kids and attack. Because there certainly are some angry teenagers out there that would say, let me go get my vicious pit bull and stick it on these bullies that are picking on me and then we'd end up with a lot more kids being mauled. At best case scenario, if the Pokemon world actually existed, you would have to assume that every single Pokemon, always from birth, is very emotionally mature and calm and logical and would never endanger the life of kids, which almost certainly is not really the case, and would never attack other kids, which is almost certainly not the case, because in the Pokemon cartoon you see Pikachu more than happy to potentially electrocute to death Team Rocket over and over again, and in the Pokemon movies Ash Ketchum has definitely been put into dangerous situations. Of course, that is the nature of any adventure story, is that there is going to be an element of thrill and danger. But yeah, Pokemon is often jokingly described as a dog fighting simulator, but it is also very much a child abandonment, child endangerment simulator too. Kids wandering around all over places. Moving on, Chained Echoes apparently is a game that launches December 8th. This is the first I've heard of this game. It is so crazy that some games really do just announce, and then they announce that they're going to release in a couple of weeks, and that is it. Particularly Japanese companies tend not to do that, but certainly some of them obviously do. Valkyrie Elysium update is now available. It adds Hilde's Vengeance, the Seraphic Gate, and new difficulty modes. Yeah. I literally am shocked every time I remember that Darkest Dungeon has difficulty modes. The game is so balanced anyways that even playing on easy is like way too difficult. The idea of there being extra difficulty on top of that is insane. Let's see, Need for Speed Unbound has a takeover events trailer if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Kickstarter campaign has been launched for an open world life simulator called The Witch of Fern Island, which we are oddly backsliding into the idea of games being kickstarted. This looks nice, but that really doesn't mean anything as far as a Kickstarter at all. It doesn't mean the game is actually going to be finished or finished in a reasonable, timely manner. The best case scenario for Kickstarter games would have been when they were saying, well, we're doing this Kickstarter just to prove to a publisher that there's interest so that the publisher will fund it. But even that idea never really worked, and it highlights that the publisher is not really committed to actually funding the development of a game if they need to be convinced by Kickstarters and pre-orders. And that's why most publishers are not doing that. That looked like that may have been the trend at some point, that big publishers like Square Enix and EA were going to require companies to kickstart the games. But the negative aspects of that are kind of harder to realize if you haven't been through it once. Like, you set expectations just way too high. This game looks like it is basically a nicer Stardew Valley type game, farming, growing. And the problem, particularly right now with something like that, is that in this game you're a witch and you do some magic, which is probably not that interesting or that special. Compare that to doing Disney's Midnight Valley, where you could be wandering around with all the Disney characters. I think anybody interested in a game like this would be way happier to do Midnight Valley and play the Disney characters. And you also have that extra level of support that the Disney Midnight Valley game will get updated, where this game, if it needs a Kickstarter to even be made, probably isn't going to be supported or updated that much. Moving on, Grisaya Phantom Trigger 7 is coming to Switch in December and 8 in February. This is the two final entries in the series. I assume these are kind of visual novels. Yeah. I assume these are also fairly old visual novels. Even looking at this, there is kind of a difference here in the animation styles between 7 and 8. There's more of a softer detail and maybe a little bit more shadowing, definitely zoomed out on this character, whereas this looks a little bit jaggier and a little bit harsher on the nose. There's more lines of detail, it feels like, in this hair than this hair, but maybe not. Definitely more zoomed in here, but definitely doesn't feel like the same process was done here. Like, this guy is in shadow on most of his face. This one barely has a slight shadow here. This one has a bright blue eyes, dark eyes. Maybe this guy's supposed to be a bad guy. Maybe they're hinting at that. The logo is bigger on this. I don't know if you really needed to change it that much. But yeah, the outfit here is brighter. There's just a color palette, maybe more of a difference than even the art styles. But I think the art styles too. The line just seems thinner here around the edge, where this feels a little jaggier, a little thicker. Of course, I don't have time to really get into a whole breakdown on art. Famitsu issue review scores for issue 1771. Let's see, Vanguard, Cardfight Vanguard Duels 30, God of War Ragnarok 36 out of 40, which is 9s across the board, so a very good game, but not the greatest game ever. And arguably, maybe this highlights a problem with the 4-reviewer system, in that Gotham Knights, which was a pretty buggy game, and from what I saw from reviews, boring games, and I haven't heard any non-mainstream video gamers, any non-video game journalists talk about Gotham Knights, so maybe non-game journalists actually do like it more. But the 3 points of difference between a 33, which is an average game, and a 36, which is a pretty good game, but honestly I was thinking closer to 37 to 38 for God of War Ragnarok. Monochrome Mobius gets a 32. I couldn't even tell you that. Sonic Frontiers gets a 35, so it's only 1 point worse than God of War Ragnarok, which maybe means that Sonic Frontiers is actually really good. Yeah, live in hope, and based on these reviews, if you can trust them at all, believe that Sonic Frontiers might be actually good. Sympathy Kiss 31, and World Rally Championships 32. Yeah, interesting. Sonic Frontiers, that's really what I take from that, is that Sonic Frontiers apparently is better than I thought. Tales of Symphonia Remastered launches February 16th in Japan, February 17th worldwide. This looks like just a RPG game, of which I'm not that interested. Romance visual novel Koei Suru Kanojo no Bikiyo na Butai is coming to the PS4 Switch on February 22nd in Japan. Which that is a long title. I don't know what that would mean. Let's see. It's the students of this academy are all excited about a cultural festival. However, the clubs may not, with not many members, have a problem on their hands. If they don't complete the tasks the student council assigned to them for the festival, then their club will be disbanded. Interesting. So it's a mostly slice of life story, it seems like, with this club working together. And then you have We Went to the Beach episodes, extra cover art. Another romance visual novel. Was the other one a romance visual novel? I don't remember now. I just saw it. Is coming to the PS4 and Switch on February 22nd, probably from the same developer. This is more of an anime cat girl, and I would say this is definitely getting into the moe style, because zoomed in like this cat girl does seem fairly short and decent amount of skin showing. And PlayStation 4 and Switch, but no PlayStation 5. This highlights something unique too, in that they're being allowed to use a black PlayStation 4 logo that fits very nicely into the black background, making the Nintendo Switch logo over here stand out quite a bit. In the past, I've definitely seen PlayStation 4 logos that were way bigger, and I've seen logos that take up the entire top half of the art. That being said, this is the reversible cover, which seems to have less limitations than the original cover, because this is way more being taken up as far as branding, and I'd like to see all of that go away, frankly, in the next generations of games. Also, you have a level of censorship here that they have zoomed in quite a bit on the PlayStation 4 to cut out any legs showing on this character, and they have moved the logo over here covering up some of this arm, although I don't know if that's really so much censorship as just there not really being enough room to also cover up the belly and have room for the logos. Moving on, Neo Geo Pocket Collection Pocket Color Selection Volume 2 is now available. Several games being revealed. Almost certainly none of them people in the West have ever played or heard of. Check out that article if you're interested. I really need to burn through the news. PlayStation Plus catalog we already talked about. A game called Vimba adds a Switch version and launches in the spring. Is this some kind of cooking game? Yeah, apparently so. I don't recognize this game. You always run into this risk of cooking games in which you're actually going to have to butcher and cook animals, that it gets a little gross. So this kind of almost fabric yarn like art style is what it looks like. They're cooking Indian food here, which also puts a weird twist on it, because you're cooking food that most people in the West outside of India won't recognize and have ever eaten, so that would feel a little weird too. Plus, if it's Indian food, it's almost certainly keeping within their religious dietary restrictions, so fish and chicken, but no cow for sure, probably not any pork. It says it's a narrative cooking game. It's probably a niche on a niche. Cooking games being a niche to start with, and then Indian food being a niche. It might be very interesting, but I bet not that many people ever hear about it or play it. The game Goodbye World was another game that was announced, and I guess we can see that it is some kind of adventure game. Yep. It looks like it's a Game Boy game at times. It's kind of like an RPG game, with the actual gameplay maybe boiling down to playing this really simplistic Game Boy game instead. Boy, does that not look interesting. I played a game called Always Sometimes Monsters or Sometimes Always Monsters. There's a sequel that's named one of those two, and the other is named the other. And really, it was just an RPG Maker game of misery, of being broke and leading towards ruining your life. And it's just like, boy, was that not a fun story to live through or play through as a game, and it was not a fun story to hear at all. Have a Nice Death. I think we've pretty much seen this one. This is the kind of Metroidvania hack and slash game where you play as death. Looks very nicely polished. They're calling it a roguelite game, so maybe not so much a Metroidvania game. But yeah, a lot of hacking and slashing. Game called Akad launches December 15th for PC and Switch, which seems to be a game where you run around picking up items and crafting as a raccoon. Where, yeah, I guess there's a slight twist there. That's probably not enough of a twist, though, that would make me want to spend most of my time playing a flower picking simulator. Devolver Digital and RX announced a side-scrolling action platformer called Pepper Grinder for Switch and PC. Sounds like a lot of these games that were at the Nintendo Mini and announced as indie games are Switch and PC games. We may hit a point where Nintendo really starts to get afraid of PC gaming in Japan, since, like I said, PC gaming doubled in the last 3 years in Japan, and we might start to see exclusive to the Switch, and then six weeks later it comes out on PC. I guess I would like to try the idea of controlling a drill to do what otherwise would be kind of a frustration platformer, but it would be very risky because I could see myself not really enjoying this gameplay mechanic or finding it incredibly difficult. But I would have to give something like this a try. And I guess you'd need a demo or something like that. And I don't bother with demos, so it would be a risky choice. Coffee Talk Episode 2, Hibiscus and Butterfly, which I think this is the kind of flat animated game, yeah, where you're serving coffee and then just doing a visual novel. And it being episodic is disappointing. Oni Road to the Mightiest Oni is one we've already seen bits of. We play as a little Japanese demon. Seems like it's more open world of a game than I thought it was. Well, there might be an adventure here, or this might be just mostly an empty open world experience. Desta, The Memories Between. See, Komatsu is just doing a much better job here as far as this Nintendo Direct. They've got a video specifically for each of the video games. They're making an article for each of the video games. They're just like really trying, whereas Video Games Chronicles really didn't. They just gave us a list of games with a small sentence description. This game Desta looks like it is some kind of weird magical dodgeball game. They're calling it a strategy game. And I kind of feel like the way it actually is controlled and the way it's actually going to be shown is way different than that trailer. apparently this game is already on iOS and Android, so anybody who's played it there probably has a much better idea of what it actually looks like and how it actually plays. I don't want to see a lot of mobile games coming to Switch and PC, but if they're good, I'll give them a chance. Space for the Unbound, launching January 19th. This seems very much like a visual novel. It's tagged as an adventure game. This might interest me, but there's a lot going against it with this art style. I would kind of have to see some reviews for a game like that to catch my attention. Dordogne, Dordogne. I don't know how you'd pronounce that. It's also labeled as an adventure. We're going for what I think they're describing as a watercolor art style, and watercolor backgrounds with 3D in characters. This may very well just be a slice of life kid having a little child adventure, running around taking pictures and goofing off. Looks like it might be interesting, although really no action there, so I wouldn't expect there to be a fighting mechanic or anything like that. A puzzle adventure game called Botany Manor. I was not expecting Botany Manor to be a puzzle game. I was kind of expecting it to be a flower raising game, some simplistic experience like that. So this may very well just be a Puzzle Academy clone. Now, after The Witness, anytime you see any specific art style, there might be some reason for that art style. So the fact that there's a lot of flowers and they are all kind of rough and you just aren't seeing any like straight lines, as it were, maybe indicates something, but maybe not. Just because it's a puzzle game doesn't mean that there's a giant puzzle mechanic. It might very well be that all we're seeing right now is just the environment, and then you get in the environment and then you have to solve very bespoke and unique puzzles each time. Like, I could see this cabinet being a puzzle, and then you have to solve that, and then you find a completely different kind of puzzle. Could also have a lot of hidden object type elements too in it. That is a possibility. Once Upon a Jester is now available for Switch and PC, which maybe a game like this should have been advertised a little bit more, but maybe it's just too much of a joke game and too much of a simplistic game. I wouldn't be surprised if this is not that long, and so a surprise release might be the best way to get it out there. It looks interesting enough, but again, I would wait for reviews. And then of course the big game is Rogue Legacy 2. It's already been released for Xbox One, Xbox Series, and PC, so now it's on the Switch. I haven't gotten around to playing it or owning it, so I really don't have any plans to buy it anytime soon. Although, in all fairness, if somebody was going to do me the greatest favor of gifting me Rogue Legacy 2 on my Steam follow list, that would be a great game to contrast Darkest Dungeon with. As much as I didn't like Darkest Dungeon, I think I could really get into Rogue Legacy 2 and make a nice contrast to that. Of course, that would be a big time commitment. A game called Blank launches February 14th in 2023. Every time there's a new year, it takes half the year to get used to saying it. Yep. So it is very sharp black and white animation style, and it seems like you have a black and white character who are going to work together to solve platforming puzzles. That could be interesting, cutesy, certainly. I wouldn't expect too much from it. WrestleQuest launches in May of 2023. I would like to see this game succeed quite a bit, because the idea of an RPG with wrestlers is something that people should try. I'd like to see it work, but it could also just be too much of a gimmick, and it might just also highlight that wrestling is just not as popular as it ever pretends to be. So making an RPG around wrestlers may be a dumb idea. These are definitely some old WWE, WWF, WCW characters that are being parodied here. I don't know if they actually got the rights to the likenesses of those characters, but you really probably don't need it. But these are also some very old characters too. When you're talking Andre the Giant, Jake the Snake, Macho Man Randy Savage, I think. And while I do recognize the visuals of these two characters, I couldn't tell you who they are by name. Sergeant Slaughter, I assume. This guy, I couldn't tell you who he is. These statues back here, I really couldn't tell you who they are. They are definitely more of a generation behind when I first watched wrestling. So this may be a game for people who are older than even I am, and I'm not sure if wrestling fans of that age would have any interest in playing an RPG game or not. If it was a cell phone game, maybe it would catch more people's attention that way. It really visually didn't look like it needed to be on a console or a PC. Wobble Dogs comes out on Switch November 17th, which I don't think there's anything here that would particularly interest me. They mutate and grow, apparently. It's just like kind of a goat simulator clone would be what I would describe it as. Just funny joke game. A game called Storyteller launches March 23rd, which seems like you get to pick the events. Build tales of love, betrayal, and revenge. Which, yeah, that might be a hard game to wrap your mind around. Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of like a drag and drop characters to make a story however you want it to go. And I don't know if there's a puzzle aspect to this or whether you can just do whatever you want to do. Like this saying the butler did it implies to me that you probably do have a puzzle element to it. That does seem like that is the way this goes. So affair and execute, night and day as elements. So yeah, it's a puzzle game where you drag and drop and add the right characters to get the right endings, and things you do in the left panel affects what happens in the future on the right panel. That doesn't look terrible. You probably will run out of content fairly quickly. I could see myself definitely burning through Storyteller in just a few hours. But it's an interesting looking puzzle game. I'd give it a try. The game World of Horror launches in summer of 2023 for PS4, PS5, Switch, and PC. This is a cosmic horror RPG built in MS Paint, apparently. And it definitely looks similar to another game that was based off of the Junji Ito stories where these might be original stories, but somewhat similar to that manga style. Leave it at that. Inscription is coming to the Switch on December 1st. We all know what Inscription is to a certain level. Cozy puzzle game A Little to the Left is now available for Switch and PC. It says it's a puzzle game. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, my cushions have gone way too flat. Alright, this is this game where you're just moving things around and kind of packing and organizing to get better OCD visuals. And I remember when this was announced, and it seemed like a very weird game that would really appeal to people with OCD in possibly a negative way. But yeah, I'm not sure there really is much of a game otherwise here, other than visually sorting and visually organizing. People that play that game better have ideally immaculately clean and organized houses, otherwise you've got no justification whatsoever playing a game like that. And unfortunately, I am definitely not that organized in my house, so I don't think I would feel emotionally well playing that game while looking at disorganized piles of Lego boxes and Lego sets all over the place that need more organization. We already talked about Sports Story launching in December. Yeah. It is a Switch exclusive. And I guess the question was Golf Story ever anything other than a Switch exclusive? I don't think I'm going to get that answer, unfortunately. Okay. So let's try and burn through the games that came out on Steam very quickly here, since we are already 3 hours and 30 minutes in, roughly. I'll give this a follow. Oh, you're gonna give me trouble? Let's see. This gives me a good opportunity, potentially. Here's a little to the left. Honestly, I probably would play this, but I'd feel bad about it. Let's just go ahead and put it on the wish list. It's already rated very positively. It's been a long time since we've had a game that could just immediately be put on the wish list. Yeah, this gives me a good opportunity to not overemphasize adult games here. Here we have one called Perfect Date that just came up. It's CG characters. Noticeably, there's at least one character that is covered in tattoos, and then there's another lady who has dark skin, at least one dark skin character. So there's just like a lot more variety in the 3D models here than what you normally see. Normally you see just a blonde white woman. Here I see a tan black haired lady, a white woman with pink hair, a white woman with dirty blonde hair, and then a white woman with more leather outfits on, whereas most of the other ones are completely nude. And she has a short haircut and has a bunch of tattoos. So yeah, a lot of variety there. Perfect Date is selling for $9.99. It's English only. It does not look bad. It looks like there's an actual attempt at appealing. It still really is just mostly 3D scenes. Probably not much of a video game at all. It's not even really trying to sell itself as a visual novel, so there's not a single screenshot that says any text at all. It just has some continue buttons, so you may very well just click the continue button and go from one pose of the realistic 3D model of a character to another pose. So it by far could not be worth $10, almost certainly isn't worth $10, but also is visually looking better. I'll give this a follow, mostly just to make a YouTube short out of it, although I really don't have to put a follow on something just because I'm going to make a YouTube short on it. I need to take some extra time and get rid of the YouTube shorts. Also, I've got too many tabs open. I need to figure out a better system anyways, as far as how all of that's going to work. This is a Cobra Kai 2 Dojo's Rising. Neither of these are being published or developed by Netflix directly, interestingly. Though, you'd think that Netflix would have their own game publishing division instead of Game Mill. And I assume Cobra Kai is something that can be trademarked and copyrighted, and somebody couldn't just make a game called Cobra Kai. That's the assumption I would have to make. Because, like, Cobra Kai doesn't really mean anything. If anything, probably means even less than you would think if you were to try and translate it. There's a game that looks like a card-based kind of Darkest Dungeon. I like the visuals here, although Darkest Dungeon really is turning me away from potentially playing anything that looks anything like Darkest Dungeon. Although I need to separate in my mind. The reason I mostly don't like Darkest Dungeon is because it's taken too much of my time and it really just has not rewarded me well. It's very, very possible somebody else can make a game that looks exactly like Darkest Dungeon and it rewards the player much nicer and doesn't disrespect the player's time anywhere as much as Darkest Dungeon does. So I need to be careful not to confuse visuals with experience. We'll give Truskate a follow. I don't know if there really is a lesson to learn as far as YouTube Shorts, if I'm getting a better understanding that some videos, some of the shorts definitely are not getting views at all, and some are getting a lot of views. If anything, the lesson I would learn, is this an adult game? Would be to just flood Steam. Scenes not suitable for all ages, as well as some slightly nude costumes. Slightly nude costumes is an interesting phrase. What's kind of interesting in this is obviously one of these Japanese RPGs that's been kind of censored to sell on Steam. But here you have a very moe character. The head is way bigger than the shoulders. She is way shorter. But she's not in a school uniform, so... And this is censored, so she's been allowed, I guess, on Steam. Like, clearly, there would have been more underwear shown in this scene, and it's been censored, and I could even see her being completely topless there. Here, I guess in comparison, you have even a more younger looking character on the side, and you could argue that that is a school uniform, certainly. This one almost feels like it was slipped through. Pretty much everybody in this world seems to be depicted as very moe, very short. Even a fairly adult looking character back here is very, very much in that art style. But yeah, this character is definitely bending down and is zoomed out further. So they are taller. Is there anything else special about this game now? I would suspect not. This is the kind of game you would suspect there very possibly is some kind of patch on the developer's website to bring back the adult content. But we haven't seen too many games like that lately either. It's just been a real dry well as far as Japanese games in general. We have a puzzle visual novel, match the things. I guess the question here is, would a game where you're just matching alcohol and working in a bar be an interesting enough experience? Yeah, I'll give it a follow. I don't want to make a lot of decisions ever, or agonize over decisions. Mess quest where you have to clean up from a top-down 2D perspective. There might be an idea there since that other cleaning game was somewhat popular. Can't remember what the name of that cleaning game was. Visceral Cleanup Crew, I think was the name, yeah. Or Visceral Cleanup Simulator. A top-down 2D version of that, I guess, would make some sense. Goat's Tail. Seems like it's a Jump King game with kind of a weird witch character. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do some more research on that and see later if Goat's Tail 1 actually sold. Here we have an adult furry game. Anthropomorphic animals. Many of the screenshots pornographic, or some of the screenshots. Well, actually, weirdly, only one of them. Nope, 2, 3. The percentage of ones that are adult content is actually very low for an adult game. And it seems like it's a match 3 game set in an apocalypse. So if you're into furries, Furry Survivals 18 Plus is $4.68. It's English and Russian. We're starting to see more of these Russian troll type games. It says it has full English and full Russian audio. I doubt that. Like, the war in Ukraine is still going on, so if it ever was really a case that Valve was taking a stand and saying we're not going to allow Russian companies to do business or Russian games to show up on our storefront, they're not sticking to that at this point, obviously. I guess this might have enough relevancy to put this on the follow list. But if it was just like governments were not doing business with Russia, apparently the parent companies or shell companies, probably closer to shell companies, have figured out ways to get games listed again on Steam. So this is some kind of, the map is upside down. Do you flip the world? I don't know. I'll just give it a follow anyways. Okay, Christmas Fever. A platformer where you play as a snowman, a super difficult frustration platformer. It's not a terrible thought. Like, for as many frustration platformers that are made, having one that stands out by being Christmassy is not the worst idea. But Christmas games really just do not sell year round. And that's why nobody ever bothers to make them. This almost certainly is an asset flip game. Does it support Russian? Nope. Just English. Championship Wrestling Promoter is just a simulation game. I don't think I would bother to show that out. I am once again just struggling to decide what should I curate to make a YouTube short off after, and what should I not bother to make a YouTube short on. This is probably an asset flip survival game. Not really seeing a lot of adult games. I guess what we would say is, as far as the scales, today we've seen one furry game, which is its own category, and one realistic CGI adult game, and then one Japanese adult game, possibly that's been censored, so that doesn't count. However, the balance still seems to be fairly equal for the past week or so. And so this may just be the new normal, or this may very well have been the normal always. This is just a hidden object game, so I'd say no to that. Like, I may simply have just been misled. And at a certain point, looking back to the way I thought games were being released on Steam is just going to not matter. And I just have to look forward and say, now I am looking at adult games, I'm sticking to it. I haven't gotten in trouble with YouTube around it yet, so I should just continue to look at adult games and have a better understanding of what the market is in 2022 going forward. So here's our video game developer articles. Meta is laying off over 11,000 workers, including Reality Labs employees. Everybody in IT and everybody in general is laying off people. They want to do it before Christmas, before the end of the year. Activision Blizzard CEO is confident that Microsoft's acquisition will be completed by June of 2023. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. Disco Elysium developers say they were first out of ZA/UM after a fraudulent takeover. Which, yeah, this definitely is going to court, this one, so we should wait till the legal proceedings start to really start following it. Google has begun the refund process for Google Stadia today. Google Stadia goes offline January 2023, and it's too late now, and it has nothing to do with video games, but the Sling boxes have all been shut down now. Dish no longer supporting them. Here's the counter argument that the ousted Disco Elysium devs allegedly created an environment of harassment at ZA/UM. Proving harassment or being able to do anything because of harassment is really, really hard in the working environment. And the remedies, even if you did prove harassment, I don't think are anywhere as good. So, well, yeah, again, this is a court case just about to happen, obviously, and we're gonna get bogged down in minor announcements and details if we pay too much attention this early on. GDC 2023 season viewer is live, and here's 3 must-see talks. This is GameDeveloper.com promoting themselves. Doom Eternal composer alleges id Software stole control of the soundtrack from him, which control, as that's phrased, probably never really was around. Was never the composers in the first place, because he was being hired as a work for hire. But some of the allegations have more validity in my mind. Heavy crunch schedules, creative clashes. Those can potentially be issues. Although, in this case, this may very well not lead to a lawsuit as far as the composer actually suing id Software. id Software may try to sue the composer, but like, just coming out and speaking your truth doesn't inherently mean you have a lawsuit. If he said he wasn't paid, that would be the thing he could sue for. Or if they've lied about him or libeled him or slandered him, that's something he can control. He could say, and so potentially the composer has a little bit more freedom to make a bunch of allegations against id Software, whereas if id Software tries to respond to any of these allegations, they have to be very careful that they don't say something false that's slanderous or libelous that then the composer could sue them for, which I'm sure he might be very happy to sue id Software for anything if he could. Let's see. Sony is reportedly developing a Horizon MMO with NCSoft. I guess an MMO probably would work around the Horizon world. I hope it's good, for as good as I suspect an MMO could be. But I could imagine it also could be a terrible cash-in, and it could be really bad. Alright, so here we have some more follow games. We can remove that because that looks like nothing. Lost Colors here. There's a visual novel. I think that can go because it's not relevant. We're into the Asian characters, so we really are just at the end of the follow list at this point. Laid Back Camping. This is a VR game, that's why it's staying there. Laid Back Camping is another VR game. Farewell Planet. Yeah. I think we'd say no to this. It's just not relevant enough. Every year, as I play less and less games, playing weirder games feels wrong. This is a very weird looking game, and I like it for that, but I guess I'll give it more time. Here we have, is this an adult game? It definitely looks like it could be a little adult. Violence and revealing outfits is all it says, but it's not in the adult section. So it's a wall running, almost Bayonetta style, backflipping, kicking, attacking game. I probably would say yes to this at this point. It is over 30 reviews. It is mostly positive. This obviously isn't going to be the best game ever, and maybe the overemphasis on the asset flip 3D model hurt this game, but maybe it helped it. It certainly helped it with me. I wouldn't have put this game on the follow list if it weren't for some of the TNA I'm seeing here, or some of the skin, not really TNA. Alright, we'll put that on the wish list. This is also probably the type of game that stays YouTube family friendly enough that I could actually play this, whereas so many other games cross into actually being adult content and I couldn't play it. Zorro is a game I kind of would like to say yes to, but it's not that relevant. I guess in this case I'll make an exception though and put that on the wish list. Like, Zorro's not really the most popular character ever, but he's relevant enough that one video game around him kind of makes some sense. I don't even know why this would have been on the follow list. This is just not the type of game I would play. Sumo Digital Academy Secret Mode. Soul Redimensioned. Oh, this is a remaster of a game called Duel. Unfortunately, I don't recognize a game called Duel, so while it may have had some historical value, it's not relevant to me enough that I'd put it on the wish list. Even though I accidentally just did put it on the wish list. And then this zombie game, while it doesn't look terrible as kind of a zombie asset flip game, it's not relevant. It's also a VR game, so it can go. So let's start the Duel Live spectate, and let's scroll down my Twitter feed, and then that'll be it for this longer than I would like stream. There definitely have been streams before that have gone 4 hours or longer, but for a long time here we've been able to keep it under 3 or keep it around 3 hours. And inherently, how much I ramble at the front has to do with how long the episodes go. The whole Twitter implosion seems to have slowed down somewhat. Kathy Griffith, the comedian, getting banned for impersonation seemed to kind of kill the momentum on people impersonating Elon Musk. So yeah, I haven't really seen a lot of complaints about it. There's obviously a better way that you could have bought Twitter if you want Elon Musk and slowly worked through the evaluations of people and worked through the idea of cutting the fat and laying off people. You would have done it in waves. You would have really evaluated people for a long time. You would have interviewed people at the top that you would have to trust at a certain level. If you didn't really want to trust the people at the top, the managers, then you'd have to interview the employees about how good the managers are, which that also might work. If everybody just was reviewing everybody as far as how good their coworkers were, and you just got a much better look at how things were going. The instant firing of people is something you save as a weapon against really egregious and obvious actions, inappropriate actions. You could probably instantly fire anybody. You could come in day one and say, we're looking for as little drama as possible, and thus we're giving all employees direct instructions to not post any confidential information or their own personal opinions about the new CEO or about Twitter's acquisition. And then you could just draw a line in the sand there, and anybody that violates that line would have been warned and could have been laid off at that point. And that might be more people than actually did get laid off at Twitter. It's fairly common sense. If a new boss took over at any job, you shouldn't immediately start attacking, slandering the new boss. You try to get on their good side. That's the default way you should act as far as rubbing elbows. But if I was a new boss of a company and people were angry that I was there, I would try to give them a little bit of time to adjust. And definitely I would try to do everything very privately and very individualized instead of just large swaths of laying off people. I would definitely try to reduce the amount of drama and attention. Here's an interesting story on Twitter. The Entertainment Software Association, that's the ESA, which runs the ESRB ratings board in the United States and North America, I think, in general, have decided to work with other trade associations around the world to launch a global video game coalition, GVGC. So it is now a coalition of like global video game industry lobbying, for lack of a better term, propaganda somewhat, but lobbying is really the better term to use. Um, Now, different countries around the world have different concerns, but the ESA probably should hear those other concerns from other countries around the world and other video game trade associations. But yeah, there definitely are some countries that just say, no, we hate all video games. China certainly needs more lobbying against things like that. But then there are also some countries that just have different desires too. A lot of the same people that are pushing for tighter controls, like the Japanese Zero, I imagine there's a trade association that is also related to the Japanese rating board of Zero. They may very well push for less gore and less bloody depictions in games. And so there is a danger of the trade associations all getting together and then promoting each other to be even more censorious via their ratings boards instead of being less censorious. And so they have to be kind of careful there. And the other way it certainly would go is that the Japanese Zero board may push for less censorship of Japanese games and more censorship of all non-Japanese games. It might become very globalized or very xenophobic would be the word. Well, that's the only real news that happens. So it's a slow Wednesday. That's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.